Hello. Testing. Testing, testing, testing. All right. Yeah, and I won't wait. All right. I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time this evening to be here with us. Hello. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being here this evening. My name is John Simanda. I'm the president and founder of Breaking Barriers, Connecting Cultures. This is a really important and very special event, and we're very, very privileged to have the Permanent Mission of Uganda to the United Nations provide us this venue. And we really hope to engage in a very thought-productive discussion and where we can learn from one another. We have a wonderful host of panelists here that will share with us their experiences, whether they've moved back to their respective country and have worked there, or have engaged with individuals that have actually done that, and then vice versa. For those who have moved from their respective countries in Africa and are currently residing here and have decided that they want to make United States their home. That's just a simple synopsis of what we hope to engage into this evening. That being said, we'll move on to the next slide. I wanted to share some information about Breaking Barriers. What is the organization? How did we come here? A little bit about our team, our mission, our vision, and hopefully to give you guys more insight about what we're trying to accomplish. So Breaking Barriers is a philanthropic organization. It's geared towards the unification, professional development, education, and cultural identification of Ugandans living in the diaspora. The organization serves as a change agent in the African diaspora with efforts to connect cultures. Additionally, we place emphasis on Ugandan communities. However, we do interact and engage with communities within the entire African diaspora. The organization started in 2013. We started in Silver Spring, Maryland. That's where I'm from. And through time, we have gained a lot of energy and momentum from other Africans throughout the United States that have expressed interest in the common mission that we serve. They feel that Breaking Barriers can serve a role in terms of connecting individuals to resources, not only knowledge-based, but also with human resources, and having opportunities in where we can connect with each other for the purposes of interaction and also understanding how we operate and how we make the decisions that we do, which have fostered us to experience very positive outcomes professionally, culturally, and then obviously within our educational atmosphere. So our mission is to connect and strengthen the multiple African communities through group discussions on challenging experiences in our society, as well as identifying solutions to common challenges to develop one another. Our vision is to build a sustainable network amongst Africans around the globe where we can utilize the connections to support one another in our struggles, goals, and accomplishments. How we operate is twofold. One is we host open forum discussions. The discussions are there based on opportunities and where we can learn from one another through knowledge exchange, and we focus in having forums underneath those 4 pillars that I had mentioned, whether it be within understanding our culture, understanding how we can better educate one another, looking at professional opportunities and how we can leverage each other's experiences, and then also understanding areas in where we've fallen short so that we can be better equipped to make decisions and become honestly more equipped of understanding what reality has for us as Africans in diaspora. These are a few of the locations Breaking Barriers has operated within: California, Georgia, Illinois, Louisiana, Maryland, the base location, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Virginia. Executive leadership team. I have already mentioned who I am. Once again, president and founder of Breaking Barriers. I finished my MBA at Johns Hopkins University. I did my undergraduate experience at Penn State. I currently work for Ernst & Young. I'm a manager there within their advisory practice, doing work within risk management and audit. I worked for Deloitte prior to that. I was doing work within their strategy and operations team here, and also some work in London. I'm a certified defense financial manager by trade. And then lastly, I put there my personal endeavor, which is to promote social change for Africans in the entire diaspora. I'll turn it over to my vice president.
Hello all, this is Timothy Kazanduka. I'm sure most of you guys know me from around the area. My father here is Joseph Kazanduka over here, and my mother in the back is Margaret Tumasimi. Me and John, we met each other when John was the vice president of the Uganda North American Association, and I was serving as the council representative for the Mid-Atlantic Region 1 region. I wanted to give a little bit about myself. I went to SUNY Maritime College, where I got my master's and my bachelor's degree, my bachelor's in international trade and transportation, and my master's in international transportation and trade. I also have my advanced chartering certificate, as well as being a member of the Connecticut Maritime Organization. My personal endeavor is always to engage with first-generation Ugandan Americans. I think it's very important for us that were born here to really feel as if we belong in Uganda. That's our home. We need something, we need an organization to bind us together and to grow and to be leaders back home, because at the end of the day, that's where we come from. That's where our parents came from, and they came here to give us a better life, but we always must not forget that that is our home. Concluding that, I will turn it over to Banji Laki. He's our treasurer, so if you could please come up.
Hello, everybody. My name is Banjira Latri, but I usually go by Banji. I graduated from Northeastern University with my bachelor's in business administration and concentrating in accounting, and then continued on in Northeastern University to get my master's in accounting, concentrating in audit. I serve as the treasurer for Breaking Barriers, and a little work history with me. I've been a staff accountant in 2 private equity firms in the Massachusetts area, with hopes of working either here in New York or in DC in bigger accounting firms. I joined on with Breaking Barriers earlier this season, a couple months ago, because I too believe in the strengthening of our community, the strengthening of us here in America, so that when we go back home, we have an identity, not just because we are, as people in the diaspora, we have this unique identity as people of 2 homes. We are American as well as wherever we are from. And that being said, we having this unique experience can bring what we've learned here and apply it to our nations in order to see them exceed and see them succeed and see them grow because of what they've able to do for us. They were the birthplaces of our parents. They're the places where our parents gave us a strong identity and strong values, and it makes sense that we should go back and do something in order to show our appreciation. That's me, and thank you. I'll turn this over to Geraldine.
Hello, everyone. I am Geraldine Abettor. I am a proud Musoga woman. I am, and Munyankole. I am the complete opposite of my counterparts. I've invested my life in medicine and healthcare-related things. I did both my bachelor's and master's at Emory University, bachelor's focusing on interdisciplinary studies. That's basically a complicated way of saying I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do, so I made up my own major. And then my master's is in cancer biology and translational oncology. A little bit of work history. I have experience working in the Global Health Institute, doing some field research in South Africa. I also have done research in our Cancer Institute at Emory, some volunteer work with the Refugee Center in Georgia and Atlanta, But my personal endeavor and my personal dream is to promote accessible healthcare to underserved populations. And coming from a cancer biology background and being exposed to the level of oncology-related treatment we have, specifically in Uganda, and I'm assuming also in Eastern African area, it's not as developed as the population that's rising with healthcare issues. So my personal endeavor is to break that barrier and to give our people better access to treatment and quality of care. Thank you.
And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker. He is the legal advisor for the Uganda mission. He is also my father. And yes, may I please introduce Ambassador Duncan Mahumazalachi.
Thank you very much, Banji, for that introduction. Thank you, Breaking Barriers, and yeah, everybody who is here. Welcome. It's my singular honor to welcome you to Uganda House, to Africa House, to your home. You are all very welcome. I'm representing the permanent representative, Ambassador Donia Ayeware, who has had to undertake a very urgent assignment. He would have loved to be here with you. And yeah, it's only my pleasure that he left and I slotted in, and that's how come I'm here. Just a few hours ago, jetted in from Geneva, where I was on an assignment. So in case you see me dozing, please understand where I'm coming from. At Uganda Mission, we have a mandate, one of which, the major mandate is to interface with the international world and make exploits first for our country, our national interests, and of course, Africa as a region. So we are not doing it alone. I'm so glad that we have a team of young men and women who are going to carry on what our mandate is. I look at people around here. I look at people like Edward Wanda, like Tumsime, Nabeta here, and Kazinduka. The idea of coming together as Ugandans, East Africans, and Africans was very different from what we see the young people doing right now. Because we would come, eat our local food if we could venture on them, and we could also, you know, make merry. And that was basically it. Occasionally we would bring, no, in fact, many times we would bring along the kids, and they were, I'm not too sure that they were looking forward to that, because they were always saying, oh, Uncle so-and-so is going to be there, he's going to ask me my grades, oh, I'm going to eat this food that I don't quite appreciate, but, you know, they say it is our food. And we have complicated names, at least where we go and stuff. But I'm so glad that you guys are able to pick from where we have, I'm not too sure that we have left off, but we are watching you. And nobody succeeds until the successor succeeds. So that, to that extent, we are very happy that we are handing over the baton to a team of young men who are more energetic than we are. This is a relay. We run our part, and somebody takes over. And if you don't believe in a relay having a strong successor, you only need to look at Mr. Usain Bolt. Everybody knows him. The Jamaican team was supposed to get a gold. The other guys ran their bits, and they were in front. And of course, Mr. Usain Bolt, everybody knows he will bolt, as it were. But he got this little thing called a cramp. And unfortunately, all the work that had been done in the three portions went down to zero. They couldn't get any medal. You see? So we are glad we have, you are taking the baton from us. Please run with it. Have your own successors. Make sure they succeed. So when we are asking you, it's not an individual effort. It's not like, oh, you know, I'm independent, now I can do my bit. No. Usain Bolt was independent when he was running that little lap, but the whole team was impacted by what he did, or rather failed to do. So that's one little thing I thought I would put in. And, but I have these remarks to make. And yeah, the government of Uganda recognizes the role played by you guys in the diaspora. And a department has been set up at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Kampala to do exactly that. So when you come here, you are enhancing what we do. You are, I'll make a wonderful report on Monday, and it will make me good, and thanks to you guys. The ministry has partnered with other government agencies like Uganda Investment Authority, Ministry of Lands, and the Central Bank of Uganda to mobilize and assist diaspora in the development of the country. And I believe, you know, this is done all over the place, in Kenya, in Rwanda, in Nigeria. These things, it's not confined to Uganda. So if we can do it here, if the people from Burkina Faso can do the same, I think we'll have a general whole which we can, you know, prop up and develop our countries. Uganda Mission at the United Nations has a consular section that deals with issues of the diaspora, and we encourage you to come to Uganda Mission, particularly the consular section, to avail yourself of the services they have to offer. We are ready to provide you with the assistance that you may need in this regard within our mandate and resources. Many times we make excuses as to how we can or can't do things, but we need to change our mindsets. Some of us, we are set in our ways, but I'm glad that we, you know, you guys who are succeeding us have a broader outlook. Our communities have the potential to generate wealth for generations to come. We just need to band together and support each other, and how best to do it than you guys who have the grounding in our cultural values, but also the international outlook, so you can be, you can get the best of both worlds. Whether we decide to go back to our respective countries or whether we decide to stay, still, just like the Jewish diaspora, you know, they are here. As a matter of fact, there are many more Jews in New York than in Jerusalem. Would you believe that? But they always advocate for their country back home. So wherever you are, you know, as long as, you know, you avail yourselves of the various consular opportunities at the various missions, embassies, and, you know, things like that, you can do it wherever you are. And, you know, I gather we are being live streamed. So even from here, people, wherever they are on this home called Earth, they are seeing us. So our impact is not confined in these wars. Our people and communities are used by others to generate wealth for themselves. It's time that we start doing the same. I thank you very much, and once again, you are very welcome. I'm sorry I had to get you to slumber, but my time, my body clock says I should be sleeping, and unfortunately, I brought some of you along to sleep with me. But the nightmare is over, and here you are, John.
Round of applause for Ambassador Alachi. Thank you very much, Ambassador. We certainly do appreciate your time, and we acknowledge that you have a very tight schedule and several things moving, but you've made the time to be here with us today, and certainly hasn't gone unnoticed. I wanted to touch on a few housekeeping items and walk everyone through how the agenda will be for today. That way we can stick to a schedule. So the way things are going to work, we have organized tonight to be focused mainly around the panel discussion, and we hope to accomplish that within a 2-hour time frame. And afterwards, we're going to have food and drinks. In fact, if you feel like you would like a beverage, there are beverages in the back. Feel free to help yourself. Afterwards, we're gonna have some time to get to know one another a little better. We'll have a social mixer. Some of the chairs may be moved, and we'll get some time to get to know one another more on a personal level. One of the things I've seen from presentations that Breaking Barriers have held and other forums which have been done in the past is that folks sometimes walk away and they don't know who's in the room. Would have loved to have opportunity to have everyone, introduce himself, but for the purpose of time, we won't do that. But I think it's critical when we get a chance to identify who we are. One of the things the ambassador mentioned, which stuck with me, was although after this discussion we may decide that we may move back to our country of origin or we may decide to stay here, it's important to be proud of where you come from, be an advocate, and share that information with individuals, even if they're not from your country, so they can learn and appreciate what it means to be who you are. Cultural identification is important and oftentimes overlooked. So I wanted to really stress that. That being said, we have about 2 slides here, just as a synopsis in terms of moving back to Africa. Why not? Slide. So this slide here is not meant to be intimidating, but be more factual, and we'll get into what's really going on and what is the media saying in terms of moving back. How do people feel? But based on my research, this is what most individuals that are staying in the diaspora are either saying or things that they're feeling. And so these are the top fears of why individuals have either chosen not to move back or are hesitant. Number 1 is unstable electricity stability. Number 2 is unsafe water supply. 3 is compromised security and safety measures. In most cases, there's corruption, poor infrastructure. Number 5 I found was the healthcare system was either poor or not necessarily at the level where they're currently living. The economy may not necessarily be conducive to the lifestyle that individuals would like. Social pressure, which I feel, when individuals have discussions amongst their peers, may talk about, if I was to move to my country back home, there's a certain level of expectation that I would be able to help contribute because you've been living in that country, in the U.S. or wherever in Europe, and that you have, been able to generate a certain level of income, and you could contribute positively towards the family. Number 8 was the political instability. I think one of the things we see a lot in the media is that certain countries have had, circumstances which haven't necessarily enabled the general public to be able to prosper in the way that they would like. The last 2 have to do with business and economics. I have there that the connections, you may be working with a certain field, and when you move back, ties are very important. Having individuals that you can look to and talk to in regards to helping you to get into that field. So the relationships and the connections in most cases are very critical in order for you to experience opportunities. And then lastly is the individual professional experience, making sure that you have the right level in order to have credibility so you can experience a certain level of success. Top 5 reasons to move back to Africa, very short and straightforward. Investment. African continent needs investment. We here in the diaspora, whether first or second generation, I feel fairly privileged in where we've been exposed to a lot of resources and economic, whether it be ties or just understanding and learning through our knowledge of how we can utilize what we've learned, or the connections we have, and where we can take it back and to invest, no matter what background you have professionally. Number two is to explore, understand where there are opportunities for growth, and being able to exploit them, seeing how you can turn something which is may not necessarily be seen as a treasure into something which can really prosper, and an area in where you can educate people and hopefully get investments. Number three is to influence. In Africa, there's a lot of hidden treasures, and a lot of it is in tourism. We have a lot of opportunities there to attract a lot of people from the Western world to come to our country, our continent, and where they can start to learn about, things which make us more unique, and therefore, hopefully, that would attract more people to come and explore Africa. Number four is to reintroduce Africa, which is very similar to influence. And five is just to promote wealth and prosperity. There's a lot of wealth in Africa. There's a lot of areas which haven't been discovered. There's a lot of opportunities for growth. All it takes is more connectivity, and hopefully we can be unified in the front where we can push that forward. Next slide. That being said, we'll move into our panelist speakers, and we're going to go slide by slide here, but as we go through each slide, we're going to go ahead and have the panelists introduce themselves, talk a little bit about, what brought them here today, but more importantly about their background, and then we'll have a set of questions that we'll go through. So, all right, we'll start with Andrew.
Good afternoon. Yeah, let me. All right, hopefully this is working now. Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Masoke. I have spent the last 5 years working for JP Morgan Chase, but through my career, I'll start from the beginning. I was born here in the United States. My parents are diplomats, so we lived all across Africa. So even though I'm Ugandan by origin, I spent my time living, in Tanzania, Malawi, Namibia, Nigeria, Sudan. We lived in Asia, Nepal, and in the UK. But I ended up going to boarding school in the United States. Part of it was because of the education, a really good school, and also part of it was because of the lack of education, in the secondary level for me while we were based in Nigeria. From there, I went to Connecticut College in Connecticut, and experienced going back and forth where my parents were, back and forth to Africa, back and forth to Asia, and then landed a job in the United States. And all the while thinking, this is my chance to move back to Uganda. This is my chance to get back on the continent. This is my chance to find my roots and really indulge and live a life that some of us weren't afforded, earlier in our lives. But then you get caught up in the system. So I got caught up in the system. You get a raise, you get a promotion. You kind of get stuck here. Worked in London for a bit, came back, worked for Travelers, went to Brazil, worked there for a little bit, came back. Again, saying I'm going to go back to Uganda, I'm going to go back to Africa, but never really got the opportunity. And then I went to business school. I went to Harvard Business School, received my MBA from there. And then again said to everyone, this is my chance. After this, I'm going back. Got a great job at JP Morgan and spent the last 5 years there, worked in London for them, came back. And I just recently left JP Morgan this year, and kind of in that same mode again, saying this is my chance, this is my opportunity. But I'm at the moment, I've been advising startups in the United States. I launched a company in 2012 called True IT Uganda Limited, and had a really good experience with that. It's still running. We provide broadband internet capabilities to Ugandans, both enterprise level and for personal. So in your house, offices, government, we have 2 satellites in the sky that do it, one commercial, one military grade. For the police, the United Nations, the government, et cetera. And also, during 2013, I was actually asked to be an advisor to the Minister of Finance. So I spent a couple of months in Uganda between business school and JP Morgan advising the minister, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So another great experience, loved it. Very challenging, of course. I think in terms of bureaucracy, it took a really, really long time, and having lived in the States and other, kind of Western countries, it was really tough to get anything done. Things just moved really, really slow. But a really amazing opportunity, especially for someone who wants to bring change and improve things and optimize. Was a fantastic experience, and also the feeling of giving back to your own country and helping people and looking at ways to develop the economy, understanding how we're going to take agriculture and develop that and bring these technologies. So really awesome opportunity. So I'm glad to be on this panel today with a bunch of distinguished individuals, and I hope that we have a great conversation, and I encourage you all to ask a lot of questions and challenge us and challenge yourselves and think about, what are the biggest obstacles for you, maybe perhaps moving back, or what, how can you also add value? You can also stay in this country and add a lot of value to your country, and perhaps if that's a choice, then, how can you help your country or Uganda or wherever you're from in that respect? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Very insightful. So Daniel, if you can come to the front.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Daniel Kauma. I'm a pharmacist by profession, and I currently work for Walmart Pharmacy in Maryland. I left Uganda in 1999. It was after my senior four. I got a scholarship to attend, the movement is called United World College. And this movement was started after the Second World War, and the idea was to bring young people from all over the world together to spend the last 2 years of high school with each other. So each year they bring about 100 students from almost close to 100 different countries. So you spend 2 years together, and the idea is to promote global peace through education. So I got that scholarship after my senior four. I attended Red Cross Nordic United World College. That was in Norway. After 2 years in Norway, I got a scholarship to Minnesota to attend McAllister College. But that's where Kofi Annan went for college, so we're proud of Kofi Annan. And then from McAllister College, I did my pharmacy degree at the University of Minnesota. I don't know why I spent 8 years in Minnesota. I still ask myself that question. It was really cold. And that's probably one of the reasons why I'm interested in this topic, moving back to warm Uganda. But overall, I've been involved in most of the community organizations we have had, from Minnesota to UNA. Most of you must have listened to what was going on over the summer. I was running for UNA president. And from what I hear, they're still counting the votes. So when the results are out, we'll find out what happened in that election. But overall, I'm excited to be here because I remember the moment when I was told you got the scholarship to go to Norway, how excited I was, how everybody was happy for me. There were parties at home. Even when you're going to the airport, they get taxis and buses full of people to escort you to the airport. So pretty much living Uganda was like winning the lottery. I think most of you must have had parties when you are leaving. It's such a great experience. You are excited, you're ecstatic. And when we talk about the idea of moving back to Africa, most people say, are you crazy? Because if you look at the lines of people every day at the US Embassy, at the British Embassy, at other embassies, everyone is trying to get out. I was looking at the photo of, when there was the hurricane in Miami, in Florida, and there was a line of cars coming on the other side of the road, and there was one car going back. So I think that's the migration stream in Africa right now. People are trying to get out. And the reason, I think, is because there's this perception of opportunity to seek greener pastures. And when I was that young man in college, because of what I saw, what I was exposed to, the media, and I think we are guilty to a certain extent. I was talking to them how in December we go back for holiday, we get our best clothes, you buy the most recent Nike. So we put on this image that opportunities are in the West. That if you want to be good, if you want to wear the best clothes, if you want to make money, you have to go to the West. So we're pretty much promoting tourism. I was telling this gentleman here, we're actually promoting the West instead of our countries. So I hope this discussion will kind of offer us ways in which we can start showing that the opportunity can be home. so that we don't have to have our brothers and sisters sell their livelihoods and belongings to go and apply for that visa. You know how much money the US Embassy makes from visa applicants who don't even get the visa? So if that money was invested in our countries, where would we be today? So I think those are things we need to look at, and I hope this discussion will be engaging. And I'm glad to be one of the panelists, but I'll keep it brief. I'm glad to be here today, and I would like to thank John, because this event was supposed to be in Miami at the convention. And I remember how disappointed John was that we're not able to have this panel discussion in Miami, but everything happens for a reason. And I think we actually have a better cast today. We have people who have actually lived that experience of going back home. Some of us have struggled with it. When I look at 19 years, actually, I didn't realize it was 19 until I started counting it the other day. Like, it's been 19 years. That's more than half of my livelihood away from Uganda. So I hope we can listen to the stories of some. Ruth, I met Ruth in, I think, 2010. She'll talk about her story. I was visiting a friend in Boston, and somehow he invited Ruth, and I met Ruth, and she said she was going back to Uganda. And they said she's going to form a charity. And it's like, that's crazy. You know, leaving the diaspora to go and form a charity in Uganda after living in the diaspora for so many years. So it's a great coincidence that we have Ruth here, but I would like to hear her story since we met in 2010. So thank you, everybody. I look forward to engaging with the panelists and you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. All right, Mr. Wale, please come to the front.
Thank you very much. Thank you, John. It seems like you put the guys ahead of the girls.
Not intentional by any means.
I trust that. It's actually a very balanced panel. Good evening, everybody. It's really exciting for me to be here because I'm not from Uganda, but my heart is. So I run a nonprofit called African Views Organization. We do research and analysis on African affairs globally. Our mission is to promote cultural sustainability and cultural harmony. It's really not by coincidence that I'm here today. A common friend of ours, Angela Bukenya, who I must thank quite graciously, suggested me for this panel. And thank you, John, for bringing me on. We've done many works in Uganda that I'm very proud of. There's one thing that is quite common and precious to us Africans. There is a proverb, an African proverb, that says, what you're looking for in Sokoto is in the Sokoto. Now, keep in mind, both Sokoto and Sokoto spells the same. Sokoto is a far distance place, and Sokoto is your pocket, your trousers. Why am I telling you this? I'm incredibly excited to have Ambassador Lashi here today. He perhaps does not even remember me. But he is the absolute exemplary of what it means to go back home and add value. I don't know how many of you know him quite well, but he authored a book called The Teeth May Smile, but the Heart Does Not Forget. That's a Ugandan proverb. Does anybody know this book? Wow. Well, you have lots to catch up on because we have a treasure among us today. Thank you, sir. Ambassador Duncan tells the whole story, and I won't give it away because you really need to find the book and read it. It is one of the most precious books I've ever came across, and one of the best read you can ever find. It's written in partnership with Andrew Rice. Thank you again, Ambassador. It's great to see you. When it comes to which direction we go when it comes to migration in the African context, we need to ask ourselves, why are people living in the first place? And until that question is answered, I think there will always be this struggle. Now, this challenge is not unique to Africans. Many people from other cultures have gone through these challenges as well across time. The Chinese have, the Indians have, many others have. And if you look at how they reconciled it, there was a wealth effect triggered. There was a wealth effect triggered that allowed people to conveniently move back home. Now, we all know the importance of going back home. And as the ambassador said, we also know the importance of being here. And I don't think that they are separable. I don't think they are mutually separable, exclusive. Is that my microphone? Okay. The reason is the presence, take for instance Uganda, since we are here, the presence of being Ugandan here is just as important as being Ugandan at home. And we have to ask ourselves, which came first? Is it the chicken or the egg? The reason I'm saying this is, where do we begin to cultivate value? Where do we begin to attract value? Many of us have reasons not to go back home, and we are quite right about that. It's because our expectations are not met. It's because we acquire different tastes, and so on and so forth, all the listed items before. But the same thing here. How much of us here are representing the value of Ugandan here? So again, I know there's much to discuss, and I'll stop it at that for now and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Wale. Ms. Ruth.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ruth Ndiabahika, and like it says, I'm a child psychologist. I lived for a long, long time, like was mentioned here by Daniel, in Boston, Massachusetts, for 20 years, actually. I went there with my mom, who had gone for further education, and she took me along to go to school and be with her. So I had a soft landing because I had my mom, and she was living on campus. We had our own. I actually thought all of living in the States was living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in the Harvard area, getting to eat anything you want in the cafeteria, having your mom give you pocket, it was a soft landing. I started school, went on to college. I studied at Wheelock College and Northeastern University. I became independent early because mom finished what she was studying and went back home. But she left me set up in an apartment, and I started paying rent at a very, very young age. My brother Apollo, who is here in the audience, came to be to the US as well, and so I had my big brother with me, and that helped a lot. When we were in Boston, we lived there for about a year or two, and we didn't meet Africans. We were in Harvard, in the Harvard area. And we'd meet people from Nigeria and get all excited, we've met an African. And then we had friends. I went home for holidays, and somebody gave me a letter to bring for a friend in Boston. And the letter, I called the person came and met me and said, oh, we have a party. And the next weekend we went to Waltham and found the whole of Uganda actually lives lives in Boston. Anyway, so we had the whole huge, as you know, huge Boston community. My experience in the US was one where I did immediately go to school. I did have my mom here with me. Then I had my brother, and then I had the entire Ugandan community. And then I had a good job because I did go to school and get a good job. And something that many people don't know is it was kind of easy for me because I was born in Chicago. So I'm a U.S. citizen by birth, but I never thought of myself as an American. I always, if you ask me what I am, I never ever said that. I always said I'm Ugandan because that's how I felt, without even thinking twice about it. So I'm going to jump forward. One day we had a movie night at our house. Apollo and I were living together, and we had friends who we had movie nights at different people's homes, and they were all Americans, and we were actually the only blacks in the group. Now these people were about 8 people, and they brought a DVD to our home, and it was called Invisible Children, the rough cut. So we put it in the DVD player. It was in the days of DVD players. And if any of you have watched it, it's about the atrocities carried out by the children of northern Uganda by Joseph Kony. It's very, very sad. Watching it is sad. But what saddened me more is that this was in my country. And I didn't know, we all heard about the kids, the night commuters who couldn't sleep at home because if they slept at home, they would be abducted. So they had to go with like newspapers and mats and sleep in public places so that there was safety in numbers and they were protected by soldiers, but not really protected. So basically we knew a bit of the story, but there's something about watching it, the visual effect. Honestly, my reaction was sadness, but also embarrassment, because here I was living my happy life without a care, not really knowing about what was happening at home. And these people knew more about it than I did. So I felt ashamed. And I think we talked about that too, how news comes here in more detail, sometimes faster than it gets to us at home. We looked at the back of the DVD, and there's the information of Invisible Children, and we contacted them. Long story short, Apollo and I became advocates for invisible children in like the New England area. So suddenly life changed. I became this person that you see carrying signs, walking around saying, Joseph Kony, talking about the northern Uganda situation. And I felt very passionately about it. And I was very shy. I didn't like public speaking, but it became this thing of, if you don't speak for them, who will? So you need to be that voice. So I'd go to churches, go to colleges, anywhere where there were gatherings. I even came here. This room was open to us, and we made as much noise as we could. And we went far. We actually went far. We were in D.C. Anyway, I got a letter from Kennedy, saying, thanking us, because they said they had never heard about what was happening. They said, how come we've never heard about it? If it's this bad, how come nobody makes noise about it? Anyway, so that became my introduction to that world. And suddenly, my holidays in Uganda were no longer just hanging out, but going to northern Uganda to actually be with these kids as a child psychologist and do what I could to help with the process of, it was rehabilitation at that point. And I loved it. And I think it's a gift to find something that you actually love. I think we spend a lot of our time, education, socializing, trying to find that thing that we love. So I feel like God gave me a gift, because I actually saw that I could do something with what I learned and actually make a difference in children's lives. So that's when I said, you know what? Well, I would go back to the United States, and I'm a psychologist for children who had issues that were serious, but I didn't empathize with them anymore. So I knew it was time for me to go back home. But I did it right, slowly, systematically. It took me 2 years to actually move. We'll talk about that as we go along. I'm sure some of you have questions, but it was a very systematic process. I even went home for 3 months at one point and registered and got to meet people, and then came back, and I was ready. So I packed up, did this. I actually packed as much as I could. I'm almost a hoarder. Okay, I'm a hoarder. So I packed paper towel, Tide liquid detergent, because I said I'm going to the village, because I'm not in Kampala, which is the city. I'm in Kabale. He's been there. A few of you have been there. So then I reached Uganda, and the container didn't come. So I lived for about a year with none of the things that I had planned to move with, But then this is how it was terrible, but for some reason I didn't realize, I didn't miss the paper towel, I didn't miss the I didn't have a microwave, we didn't have a fridge, we didn't miss it. I didn't miss it personally. And yet I couldn't imagine life without a microwave. So you start to realize that certain things that you put value in actually don't matter as much as you think they do. When I was looking at that list that was put up there. So now I started, I should be more, I have a home for girls. It's called Grace Villa, named after my mom. Her name is Reverend Canon Grace Ndiabahika. She was the first woman to be ordained as an Anglican priest in Africa. So you can imagine the challenges that she went through. So she's my role model. And I wish upon the children what she is, a person of grace who has been through challenges and who says, as a woman, I can be whatever I want to be if I'm given the opportunity. And that's what we're giving the children, a place of grace for them. We bring them in the home, we love them, but we also nurture them. We're very strict on them, and we give them an education, we give them food, and time is up. And I think I've said enough. I look forward to talking, conversing with you more through this event. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody. John and your team.
All right, thank you very much for those words. Tessa Kurosaki, please join us.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tessa Kurosaki. I was born and raised in the U.S. My brothers and I are first generation. We grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. My brothers and I were, I wouldn't say raised in a bubble, but I can imagine the stress of my parents raising children in a country unknown to them. We'd say, oh, well, we have some friends asking us to sleep over, and my dad would say, why, when you have a bed at home? That kind of thing. And fortunately, we were able to travel back to Uganda almost every year or every 2 years. And we were those kids that carried like cereal and Fruit Loops and little American snacks because we didn't understand what Weetabix is and, the foods in Uganda. We had our challenges growing up as first generation. Our U.S. friends would ask us questions and sometimes maybe, make fun of us, and then we'd go home and it'd be kind of the same thing. So we kind of felt like, where do we belong? So growing up, both of my brothers did stints. One brother did some time in Rwanda, lived in Rwanda for like 2 years, and another brother of mine lived in Uganda for probably about the same amount of time. And so it just got to a point where I said, you know what, if they can do it, I can do it. And I'm the oldest, so if they can do it, then I can. So after finishing school at Catholic University in Washington, D.C., I don't know what's happening. Okay. After finishing school at Catholic U, I worked in marketing for several years, and I decided to just pack up and move to Uganda. And when I moved to Uganda, I moved with a job, and I was working in Uganda as head of operations. And simultaneously, I was running my own business. I was in event management, and it started taking off. And so I just started doing that full time. And then I moved back. I just recently moved back, actually, at the end of last year. I moved to New York. And I'm here to further educate myself and do further studies, focusing on mental health. And I want to go back and try to lift that stigma of mental health back home. And yeah, so I was asked to be on this panel. My brother's very good friends with John, so thank you for having me. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Tessa. And without further ado, Marjorie.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Marjorie Batubiza, and I was born and raised in the United States. Both of my parents are from Uganda. Because of my father's job, we found ourselves in the Washington, D.C. area, and that's where I grew up. I've always had a really strong sense of my Ugandan identity, a lot because of how proud my parents are of their heritage, partially because of the fact that we would go very often, every other year. My parents would try and take us for an extended period of time to visit family and friends and spend time where they grew up. And then also because of the really strong community we had in the area, a lot of aunties and uncles who are also from Uganda sharing their experiences, really getting to know us almost like a very large extended family, even though we weren't necessarily related. And so because of all of those things, I've always had a really strong Ugandan identity in addition to my American identity. When I was younger, I primarily engaged with Uganda based on my personal relationships, so whether they be familial or part of this extended Ugandan community. When I got to college, I went to UNC Chapel Hill. I got involved in a different dimension. I was involved in a lot of human rights advocacy, and a lot of this centered around some of the issues going on in Central and Eastern Africa. So the issue in Northern Uganda and a lot of the spillage that happened into Southern Sudan and Eastern Congo. So I was involved a lot in that advocacy work, and I met people from other parts of Uganda for the first time, and so I was able to really connect with them on that level. And I also met a lot of friends of Uganda, people who weren't necessarily from East Africa, but who really, through this advocacy work, had developed a strong passion for making sure there's some type of remedy to some of these human rights situations. After college, I ended up working in the fashion industry. My first job was at Neiman Marcus, and I really was just living my life in Dallas, not necessarily thinking too specifically about how I was engaging with Uganda, besides just the familial and personal aspects. Then I ended up going to my master's program at the University of Notre Dame. I studied business with a focus on finance. And during that experience, I got to engage with Uganda in a totally different way. I actually, through one of my courses, was partnered with a private investor who was interested in looking for opportunities in financial services, actually specifically in northern Uganda. So I was able to go to Uganda for the first time without my family. I think I saw like 2 relatives during this trip. I was there really focused on interviewing this gentleman's potential clients, as well as understanding what the financial landscape was in Uganda and in East Africa in general. And that really opened my eyes to the myriad of opportunities that are there from a business perspective. And there are just so many, large companies that are increasing their investment there, but then also so many entrepreneurs who are trying to figure out where they can provide the most value to Ugandans as consumers. And that was something that was really exciting and really opened my eyes to the types of opportunities that exist and really the types of growth that are happening. And so I guess I'll go into more detail about some of my advocacy work and some of the things that I learned from this investment trip as we go into the different questions that are being asked. But I think those are the general experiences that I'm hoping to bring to this panel discussion.
Thank you, Marjorie. Thank you all panelist speakers for the warm introduction. We're gonna shake things up a little bit. Mr. Edmund Safali, please come to the front. We're gonna use this time a little bit of a small intermission, but at the same time, Edmund Safali is a good friend of mine. He's based in Kampala, Uganda, happens to be out here for during this period of time, and he's a motivational speaker. He wants to do a little bit of an icebreaker. So with no further ado, Edmund, please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. My name is Edmund Safali. I'm a psychologist. That is all that matters today. And I'm more importantly a Ugandan. So before we can continue with this exercise, I hope each of you has got a pen. Anyone needs a pen? All right. Please make sure you have a piece of paper and of course a pen. Are we ready to go? Are you sure you're ready? No phones, please. First of all, I want each and every one of you to draw for me a goat. In 2 seconds, a goat. In Luganda, it's called embuzi. From the west, embuzi. From where? Empene. In 2 seconds. Are we done? All right. We shall know about that more further at the end of these brilliant people, after they've expressed to us what it means, whether to go back to Africa or not. So in the meantime, can you all stand up? Feel free as possible. I hope each one of you is a Christian or at least believes in God. And for that matter, I'm going to ask each and all of you, if you all trust me, to close your eyes. Please close your eyes and open those eyes when I ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to raise your right hand. Please raise your hand as far as it can go. Now, because each one of us has got what we believe in, I would like each one of you, by using of your right hand, to show me where you believe the true north exists. Okay, open your eyes. When your hands are still raised up, look around you. Each one of you has got a perception where the true north is. Yeah? And that's what our mind is like. Some of you believe that when you are in America, glory is all here. Others of you believe that when you go to Africa, there is hunger, there are wars, there are diseases, but it's just the perception of the mind. So that was just trying to show you the mindset of every one of us. Because no one here at a particular time knows where the true north lies, unless you've got a compass. I would also like you, I hope you are all fit. Are you? Good. We are going to draw, we're using our waist. We are going to write the word Coca-Cola. Waste. H-what-to? We are going to balance on one leg and draw, all right, the word Coca-Cola. Yeah, yeah, on the ground. So let's write C O C A hyphen C O L A with a hyphen. I can tell everyone, most of you are not fit. Now let's use the waist. But I'm hoping you do not become obscene. Okay, holding your waist. Okay, let's do it. C O C A hyphen C O L A with an exclamation mark. Thank you very much.
Edmund Safali, just a round of applause. Thank you, Edmund. All right. Mr. Lucky, can you get to the next slide? Thank you. All right. So as I mentioned before, the main focus for this segment of the Community Development Panelist discussion is to focus on the panelists. We want the focus to be here. I'm going to be moving around. We want to make sure that there's clear dialogue with our audience today. So I've been requested to ask everyone who's speaking the microphone to speak as clear as possible. We've had a little bit of static, and I do apologize for that, just technically. But that being said, we're going to open up with a few questions. There will be time limits because of the fact that we want to make sure we get to each topic. We have 5 areas that we want to make sure we go through. And I think this is going to raise a lot of debate, which is great. That's what we want. We want people to be active, energetic, share what you want, of course, within scope. But at the same time, we just want everyone to be cognizant of other people who would like to be able to share their information that they have based on their experiences. All right, so the first question that we have is, has anyone thought about moving to their country of origin? And, I raise that question because it is important to have individuals share what exactly came to mind. And, when you think, whether you've been born here or if you lived in another part of the diaspora, what exactly struck that? There had to have been a moment or something that you have encountered or something that happened in your life which made you think about wanting to move back to your country of origin. So I'd ask the audience first before I go to the panelists, and then we can have some exchange. Don't all raise your hands at once. All right. Can you introduce yourself and your location of where you're from?
Do I have to stand or? No. Okay. So actually, I guess I should stand. Hello, my name is Ivoma, and I'm Nigerian, and I came with my friend Yazzie, and she's Ghanaian, and so we're both thinking about moving back to our countries of origin, and so the reason I'm interested is I noticed that there was a wave of first generations who are moving to Africa, so I started a blog focusing on African diaspora business owners who are relocating to the African continent to build businesses, because I was interested in building my own business, like many of you guys, and so as I collected their stories, and I'm on YouTube, and I do all these things, podcasting, etc., I realized that I could do that same thing too. So that's when I started thinking, I really need to go. So I'm trying to go by next year. It's time to go. Like, it's time to go. Because I think that if you're educated here, because I'm a lawyer, my friend Yazi's a PR, she also building businesses in Ghana. So I just think, you're educated, you got your education here, it's time to go. Oh, okay, yes. It's called Ivoma, which is my name, Iveoma, and my tagline is, I am the diaspora. Yeah. Oh, Ivoma, it's Iveoma. And you can find my videos on Facebook. I go to events all the time. I thought actually you guys would be done by the time we came, so I wasn't serious about filming, but y'all just started, so. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the audience? And no, that's fine. That's fine. Yep. One thing I will ask, for the purpose of camera, if you don't mind, just coming towards the front, because we have our online viewers would love to see our guests here. So whether in the front or here, whatever.
Hi, my name is Yasmin, and I'm from Ghana. I had never been to Ghana until 2014, and I was actually very anti-going. I actually cried my eyes out and begged my mom not to send me to secondary school in Ghana because I was like, oh, I'm going to get hazed, I'm going to get bullied, Africa's horrible. I had that perception. So I went in 2014 when my auntie died, and I was like, oh my God, where have I been all my life? This is where I need to be. I never felt at home. I never felt so comfortable. I mean, I loved it. I saw kids that I knew grow from when I was 7 years old. They were all doing amazing and great things in Ghana. I just loved everything about it. So I decided to go back home then. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to do the move yet, but I've been going 4 or 5 times a year, and I have set my company up there. So I still work, I work from here, and then I work from there as well. But the problem why I haven't moved there is just money. Just finding money to because in Africa you have to rent a place for a year and so on and so forth. So we are, Ivy and I, we're working together now, and we're trying to raise funds for my company and for her company. And the goal is by the end of 2018 to be living in Ghana. And I'm very excited to be here. Ivy invited me, and I'm very glad I came.
Thank you very much. So I want to pose a question now to our panelist speakers, and we'll limit it to two. Those of you which feel really compelled to answer, moving back, when you made that decision, what was the electrifying moment? If there was something that really, you intrigued you, or there was a certain person, or whether it was at work, if you could paint the picture for us and kind of walk us through what that feeling was and, what occurred, that'd be great. Ruth, you want to share?
I wasn't going to put up my hand because I feel like I talked about it a lot. When you watch Oprah, she says the aha moment. So I kind of did feel that, and I talked about it when I was at the podium, feeling like I knew what my purpose was. I felt like I had discovered what my purpose was. And I think if you do find that gift, it gives you the energy to do things that you thought you couldn't do. I don't think you can ever be 100% ready to move, for a big move. Even when I left, I was on the plane, and I knew there was something I hadn't done, But what I did do was talk about moving back a lot. Like Daniel said, I mentioned it to him. So I basically put systems in place such that I couldn't back out of this decision that I had made, because I knew it was the right one, and I knew that naturally I would be scared, but you don't let fear control you. You can never be 100% financially ready. I thought I was ready. I actually thought I was financially ready, but when I got home, I discovered it is more expensive than I had thought it would be, and also being on the ground, I ended up bringing in more kids. It was supposed to be 20 kids. We now have over 200. So our budget just went through the roof, but we're still managing and actually doing well with the little that we have. So I guess you were asking about if there was something that triggered you, and it was that, I guess if you go backwards, it was the documentary that I watched. It was joining a movement that actually showed me that even I was young at that point, even I, at my age, if a group of we were like-minded people who wanted to do something, and we actually achieved it, not with finances or anything, but with actually good planning and mobilizing and putting our hearts to it. So that also empowered me to feel like I could do what I wanted to do. And then actually discovering what my vision was and seeing that I was, knowing I could do it and it would make a difference. And yeah, so I guess that's what I have to say about that.
For me, I had traveled I made a trip back home. I had gone to Rwanda, Burundi, Kenya, and Uganda, all in that same trip. And I thought to myself, when I came back to the States, and it was like Monday morning at work at my desk, and then they're like, oh, how was your trip? I thought to myself, what am I doing here? I just felt like a robot. I woke up at, I don't know, 6:50. If I missed the bus at 7:15, that threw off the whole thing. Get to work, you drink your coffee, check emails, boom, you're like at it all day, and then you wake up and start all over again. And I just thought, I cannot do this robotic lifestyle anymore. So I started looking for jobs online, and I interviewed with Engine Uganda, which is like a local, it's a petroleum company headquarters. It wasn't an NGO or anything like that. And the day I got a phone call saying that they were going to hire me, I was laid off at my current position the same exact day. And I thought, Lord, if this is not a sign you're giving me now, let me can just start, buying all the summer gear off the clearance racks and, pack my bags and make the move. And the beauty about it, about my move back home was, when you go to visit for like 2 weeks, and you are like a robot in those 2 weeks. You wake up, you see your family, have tea, lunch, then in the evening you hang out with your cousins, you go out, and then you wake up and start the whole thing all over again. And the most beautiful part of me moving back home was getting to know my family on a different wavelength than just visiting, because you don't really get to know them when you're just visiting. So being there and living with them was the most amazing experience. Yeah, so that was my experience.
Thank you both, Ruth and Tessie. Certainly do appreciate that insight. One of the two other questions we have here, because I don't want to be redundant, we had here, and I'll push this question out to the audience and see what their thoughts and feelings are, and we'll come back to the panelists. What is your personal vision of life in Africa right now, this moment in time, not 5 years back or 10, but currently now? What is your view based on the people you know, your family members? Yes, please come to the front.
Hi, my name is Geraldine Abettor. I'm Geraldine's older sister. I'll give a small background to my answer. Earlier this summer, I accidentally moved back. And I say that because I went on vacation. And 2 weeks after I got there, I specialized in oil and gas law. 2 weeks after I got there, I was cooped for a job. So I ended up staying until this morning when I landed. So my vision for life going in was completely different to the reality of what I actually experienced. I moved to Uganda without my parents. I mean, my parents were there, but they don't live there, they live here. No brothers, no sisters, just my extended family. So being there, at first I was extremely scared because I wasn't intending to really stay. But after a while, I started to realize that actually Africa is waking up. And Africa is looking for people like you, looking for people with skills, people who are trained, people who are educated, because we have industries that are beginning to boom, and there's so many gaps that we can't fill. So it's so important, and I commend you for this forum, because it's so important that we wake up with Africa and we move back, because they're not going to wait for us. That's the reality. So wake up with Africa, consider Africa. There's plenty of opportunities. I mean, as I speak right now, I know of 2 executive positions at a major company, and they're looking for people like all of you sitting here. And it's a matter of sharing the information. So get in touch with someone who's moved there, get in touch with people who live there, explore the opportunities. But again, to answer the question, my vision for life in Africa, it's unlimited. There's expansive potential, and we just have to wake up with it.
Thank you, Gina. Strong words of encouragement. Definitely appreciate that. Do we have anyone else in the room that wants to share their view or vision of Africa? All right. Gentlemen, if you come to the front, please.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say I'm from Uganda and Rwanda, so I'm a proud African. But my vision for Africa is, I think if you read like the Wall Street Journal or the Economist, there's a lot of business opportunity that's coming up, just like Gina said. And if you're interested in investment, if you want to be an investor, you could make more money in Africa compared to being on Wall Street if you're smart, you know? So for those of us, or for those of you who are interested in business opportunities in Africa, I think this is the time. Africa is growing really, really fast. It's even growing faster than China, I believe. So if you're willing to take the step, I mean, it's so scary for some of us because we are like, you know, how am I gonna go to Africa and sleep in a house without electricity? Or how am I gonna drive from Jinja to Kampala for 2 hours when it's supposed to be 45 minutes, you know? But, you know, I think that if we prepare ourselves for that moment and just stick it out, I think the opportunity is there. So, thanks.
Before you go, please, your name.
Oh. My name is Kenneth Walube. Thanks.
Thank you, Kenneth. All right. I'm going to pose the same questions to our panelist speakers, if we can get a couple folks that we haven't heard from. Daniel?
I will just make some brief comments from the policy perspective, since we have even ambassador here. Right now, if you look at Africa in general, we have over 30 million Africans living outside their country of origins, so about 30 million. For Uganda, the most recent estimate was about 1.5 million Ugandans who live outside Uganda. So if you look at the situation in Uganda, I understand we talk about the opportunities that are available for all of us in the diaspora, but if you look at the reality on the ground, and maybe even Ruth can talk about much of the realities, unemployment is high, and everyone is trying to get out. And that's the challenge we face. Because right now, Uganda's #1 export is human capital. Like us in this room here, where the Ugandans, you are the #1 export. And some other African countries, it might be the numbers, those of us who don't have oil yet, like our friends in Nigeria, you know, flowing. Our #1 export in Uganda right now is labor. Ugandan remittances per year is $1 billion US. Coffee, which is our #1 export, is 400 million. So the money you send back home to pay for school fees, to pay for medicine, to pay for all the little necessities, you're the #1 stimulus to the Uganda's economy. So that's the challenge policymakers face, is do you encourage more productivity from outside Uganda? If you have 40% of Ugandans unemployed, of our youth, so do you encourage people who have left, who are bringing money, to come back, or do you encourage them to go and find opportunities outside Uganda? I think we need to challenge ourselves when we're having this conversation. Is the world has changed. Borders don't mean much anymore. We can be patriotic and say, you know what, I'm going back because my family is in Uganda. I want to go and change the conditions of our brothers and sisters in Uganda. But in today's world, and that's the challenges even America is having, America first, that's the debate we hear, is because national boundaries are changing, have changed the game because of globalization. The Uganda government right now, I think, was it in 2011? You can probably highlight it. They're externalizing labor. They're actually making it official for companies to come to Uganda and employ Ugandans to work in the Middle East. If you go to Uganda today and read the newspapers, people are being employed in Dubai. They're even marketing it. You go to Uganda and get a license. So we need to also look at it from that perspective that globalization has changed the game. There's a lot of unemployment back home. And right now, everyone makes a decision based on your individual. We have graduates in Uganda. In my family, I don't know how many graduates we have who are unemployed. So the question is, do we keep pushing that going back is the solution for Africa, or is it an individual decision you make to say, you know, let me go where my talents or skills take me? And then if you acquire the skills, because if we mobilize Ugandans in the diaspora, we organize ourselves, we can be able to get the capability to actually go back to Uganda and influence policies and influence the environment to make it easier for other Ugandans and other Africans to move back. But those are the numbers: 30 million Africans living abroad, 1.5 million Ugandans. We have about, I think, 40,000 Ugandans in North America. 1 billion in remittances, and for Africa it's about 500 billion, I suppose. So that's the question I wanted to pose to our policymakers and to others while we engage in this debate. Is we need to be realistic to a certain extent. Is opportunities are everywhere. Not everyone is going to move back, but are we contributing better to our economies through remittances, through direct investment and other opportunities, rather than just saying physically moving back? I think that's the challenge I wanted to pose to everybody as we go on with our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Do we have anyone on the panel that would like to add anything in addition? Oh, okay, we have a couple. All right.
Hi, everybody. John, thanks for organizing this forum. My name's Bagabo Tumushabe. I live here in New York. I work with the UN. Moving back home, if you got an opportunity, would you go back, irrespective of of the circumstances, financial or anything? Now, I want to challenge the parents who are here and the to-be parents. I don't know if I'm wrong, but I think for somebody to decide to move back home and take that decision depends on how much time they have physically been there. Do you think I'm right? I don't know, most of you guys who were born here, if you've spent there more time, then it's very easy to take that step when an opportunity comes. Now, you parents, how much time did you give or enable your kids to go back and spend time home? I had one, Karasanyi was saying, when she went back, she communicated with her relatives at another level. Not like when she used to go there for 2 weeks, a month and visit. So what I'm saying is, parents, give your kids time to go home and spend there. He can take off 2 years, go to school there. I know there are challenges with that. Find time. Most of you are tied up in this thing, oh, I can't let my kids go. My kids are too young, I need to stay with them. When they're above 12, they can really leave you for 2 years maybe. Either go to a boarding school or a local school down there. Do not put them in these international schools because you're making no difference. So for me, that's one of the things that can that can influence one's decision, either to go back or not to go back, when an opportunity shows up, like one showed up for her. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. We can move on to our discussion topic. Please come to the front.
Hello, I'm Anna Namakula, and I've been encouraged to come and speak by Mildred. So most of the New Yorkers know me. I studied here. I went back home for 3 years after my master's. I also interviewed about opportunities, and one of the challenges in Uganda is also political as well as skilled. So much as you may have a chance to find work, the people there actually do a background check. So depending on also the political party you belong to or your parents belong to, you may still not have that chance. Secondly, if you have a choice and you can actually move back for at least 2 to 3 years, you're going to really learn a lot. And after a while, you actually have the option to split your life. I hope some of you would have the same opportunity my brother and I have, because we split our professional lives between Uganda and here. Thirdly, networking is very important. You have to network beyond Uganda. For instance, much as I own 2 small businesses, and I'm also a project consultant for FAD, you've all heard about Foundation for African Development, I actually direct over 9,000 women and youth, and we are only about 4 people doing the work with the board members. But we really network globally, but it's just a shame that there are some events I attend and I'm really the only Ugandan there, and I sometimes feel like an alien. For instance, some of the women here are professionals, they do a lot of work, and they work with a lot of non-profits. There's no reason why I could be the only person as a mentor or former mentee for Cherry Blair Foundation. She recently came here, and I was the only Ugandan, the only woman from the New York area, and a lot of women traveled from Nigeria, they traveled from California, Venezuela, etc. But I was actually the only Ugandan there. Thirdly, I agree with Mr. Kauma Daniel, right? He mentioned there are a lot of graduates and a lot of young people and a lot of qualified people who were never going to find work, and a lot of people who are very unskilled, and they have no chance of ever improving their lives. So you have to find a way of becoming a solution. And if you don't have a chance to live in both countries, try to find a network, the right network of professionals, and try to work with other Africans, because you're going to actually develop professionally, and you're going to become a more credible person, and you're going to be respected more, and you're going to make an impact. There are places where I actually work, or I get elected unopposed simply because of the impact I've made, and I've only lived there for 3 years. But anyway, I wish you all the best, but try to do more research, find a way of actually living in Uganda for 2 to 3 years without leaving, because a lot of the points you're making are really more of paperwork, and you really need to live there or find someone who lives there to share that information. Then you see how you can work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. Yes, would you like to come to the front? So we're going to have just 2 more individuals for this discussion topic, and then we're going to move forward.
Thank you very much. My name's Alfred Abettor. I'd like to thank you and your team for a wonderful initiative. Wonderful in the sense that if I read it correctly, and I'd like to emphasize at the onset that I believe this is a youth effort that we should, as parents, should support from the back. So I'm conscious of the fact that we should not take on the conversation. It's your conversation, and we would like to empower you to take it on. If I read your documentation correctly, I get the sense that you have you have on one hand the initiative to let people consider the option of moving back, but should that not be feasible, then the option of remaining here and supporting the home ground is also open, which means that it's flexible. You know what I mean? We are not pushing anybody to move back, but the option is there. Now, I'd like to recall what Ruth said. She talked about the fact that she, in her own professional environment, professional knowledge, she acknowledged the fact that she could make a difference in a particular area, and she moved in what I would call a small act in a way that she used her own professional expertise to be able to make a difference. We can all do this in our own individual ways. There are many Ugandans who are skilled in various areas. In medicine, in engineering, we have Ugandans in NASA, we have Ugandans in various areas. Now, in your own individual ways, you can contribute depending on your profession. For example, we do have a number of people who have access to financing, low interest rates, and can go and invest at home. That is, we don't all have that access to all those initiatives, but those who do can make a difference. Similarly, those Ugandans at home who do not have opportunity to be able to get employment or to make a difference, see the environment as an environment which is hopeless. We do have initiative or people seeking to migrate, even from Ireland, even from England, even from other developed countries. It's not only unique to Uganda. So all those opportunities are there for others, and they are not there for a great number of people. But perhaps Duncan will also talk about the issue of the human resource and the unemployment, that the opportunities that may come from unemployment, and the fact that we all have to take advantage of the individual opportunities that are available to us and make the best out of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abettor. I'm just the last speaker here, Mr. Wale.
Thank you very much again, John. I don't think that everyone is suitable for required activities on the ground. There are people who are not going to be useful there, who are here, and I don't think there should be a need to push them. The reason is this. We should ask ourselves, given the fact that we are present globally, how come we're not able to turn this global presence to a global strength? And I think perhaps that should be a really good perspective for us. The reason is this. There's a huge unemployment on the ground. We here have access to several initiatives, several programs that are very beneficial to development on the ground. Some of them is the AGOA. There is also the required department from the African Union, as well as from the agenda that's relative to the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations, that supports these initiatives, where we here can strengthen activities on the ground by being here, really facilitate, whether it is training, whether it's opportunities, whether it's investments, things like that. Because oftentimes people who have been there holding the fort oftentimes know the best on how to run things on the ground. We coming from diaspora thinking we know better, they don't oftentimes welcome us open-handedly. So I think there should be a way to facilitate a really clear vision, a very clear dialogue between diaspora and the natives and people on the ground. See how we can actually work together. And I think that embassies like this, programs like this, are very useful towards that purpose, where not only are we talking amongst ourselves here in the diaspora, but also be inclusive of people on the ground who are interested in what's going on here and how we can actually work together. Thank you.
And I just wanted to build quickly on what Mr. Abettor said and Ambassador Duncan. I think there's a lot of resources that people don't know about to facilitate your move if you did choose to do so. One of the latest things that came out, for example, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you can now apply for your dual citizenship at our embassy here. And that was not, you weren't able to do that before. And I don't think a lot of people know it. So we need to figure out how we can share this information. Because when the first time I went back, if you go back and you have an American passport or a foreign passport, it makes doing business or applying for a lot of different things, opening bank accounts and whatnot, very, very difficult. If you have your Ugandan national ID, if you have your Ugandan citizenship, it makes things go much smoother, registering, renting houses, etc. So we have a lot of things, and we need to figure out how, maybe on our embassy website or via our consular section, but really to promote all these. There's a checklist of things that you can do prior to even going that'll make your move much easier. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And to all the panelist speakers and all the audience members that were able to contribute towards, this area. Definitely one of the things I really encourage, I know that we didn't give out notepads, but there's a lot of wealth of knowledge being dropped tonight. And again, like I said, we're going to have networking afterwards, so please let's make sure that we continue the discussion. I don't mean to move too fast, but I want to make sure that we have enough time for all the additional topics. So we're going to move on to discussion topic 2. Which is on education and professional concerns. And there, I want to first talk in regards to education at home. Let's talk about the educational system. I'd like to hear from individuals in terms of their view, and not just, because I know we have a large presence of Ugandans, but for any individual, what, from your perspective, is a view of the educational system back home? And is it strong or superior based on what you've seen in other countries, or are there areas of improvement? Where do you think there are some gaps, and if they are, how can we improve them? Because there's no sense of talking about things which are wrong if we can't necessarily provide solutions to improve them. So I do encourage anyone who has any questions or anyone who want to share any inputs. All right, come to the front, sir.
Yes, my name is Lukman, and thanks, John, right, for this opportunity and for such a wonderful idea and initiative. I'm also known by the other name called Rahman, which is an artist name. Everybody in our group here knows me. So I'm going to share something a little bit about my educational experience in Uganda, because I grew up there and I just moved here 2 years ago, and I'm settling in Brooklyn. I went to a school in the town area of Mbale, which is in eastern Uganda, and it was really good. But then because of finances, which is a very big issue there, that caused me to move to a village school. And when I moved to a village school, you go to a school and you're doing science subjects, and you'd never seen a cylinder that they use in the laboratory to measure or to mix chemicals and stuff. I went to my senior 4 exams, which is one of the national exams there that determine what you're going to be in future. And it was time to do practicals in physics exams. And they brought stuff like the glass prism and all those things. I didn't know what to do, and it was a national exam. So it came out without good results. But with my own knowledge, I managed to pass biology with a pass. Like, you know, it's not very special, biology and chemistry. And I think that if I had had opportunity to go in a good school, I would be someone very, very important. I think I am, but like they said, and thank you for encouraging. Sometimes I lose that, esteem because I feel like I miss a lot. Because of those results that I got from those exams, instead of doing science, I switched to art subjects, and I still stayed in a village school, and I came up with a pass, and I had to go to a university called Uganda Christian University to do public administration, and I graduated after spending 5 years struggling, going to work and then going to school and stuff like that. So there's a lot that affects education in Uganda. There's a lot of sort of discrimination or a big difference between people that are doing quite well off that go to these international schools. We have a few international schools there, and we have a few big schools like St. Lawrence and Budo, and there's a big population that is going to schools that don't have roofs. I heard of a school that has been there for 58 years, and they've never had structures. Yeah, last night somebody mentioned, I forgot where, but I'm gonna look it up and I'll share with you. So it is very, very hard. If you're choosing to go back to school there, I encourage, but you go to better schools. But I would encourage people to live in like these places to support those village schools where kids go to school without shoes. They're producing a lot of nothing. Like, there's a lot I can share, and I only wanted to say something little, that tonight I'm releasing my music video. I use music to advocate for people, all right?
Mr. Rockman, thank you very much. Yeah. Sure. Please order. On a serious note, Ruth.
Thanks, John. A little bit about education. So Grace Villa is a home for girls, but what we do is it's just like any other child that you have in your own home. What do? You put them through school. So I live with 24 girls in the home, but the whole project has over 215 girls. So the main thing that we focus on is education and nutrition and everything else, but each one of those kids is in a school. So when we first started the program, like I said, we were supposed to have 20 kids, and we were going to put them in the fancy school in Kabale called KPS. But as the number grew, we knew we couldn't afford that. But remember, there is UPE education. So we put the kids in Kabale in Demo, which is our UPE school in Kabale. But why are there so many kids who are not in school, yet there is free education? You get there, and each kid is expected to come with everything that goes, with school. Some kids can't even afford, a pen, a pencil. They can't even afford that. But remember, each school, you're supposed to pay the building fund, which is like 30,000. Then you're supposed to pay lunch, and it's compulsory, and that's another 35,000 per month. Yes, Uganda shillings. And then on top of that, you have to pay for compulsory coaching, which is about 15,000 per month per child. So you keep adding all these, and these amounts don't sound like much, but To me, it's a lot because I have 200 and something kids. But now imagine all those parents who couldn't even afford a pencil in the first place. So that's why there's a high dropout rate. But like our superstar just said, that education is really, really lacking. That's another thing. They're getting free education, but what sort of education are they getting? I would rather, honestly, not put my kids in a UPE school. But I do it because I have no other alternative. And we counter this with doing really intense coaching at home. So they come home and God blessed us with really good tutors who come home. So they wash their hands, have a snack, and then they go in class. So we are reteaching them because honestly, the education is really, really, really horrible. I'm speaking about Kabale, but I believe it's the same throughout the country. So something needs to be, so I first went in saying, we have all these, and schools are big business back home, huge business. People are making a lot of money from starting schools, but who can afford these fancy schools? And then, so I said, we have free schools at home. Why should we start our own school? I'll put the kids in there and support the school, like we're talking about. Trust me, it's almost impossible to support a school because they have their way of doing things that are set. You know, you can't come in and I stopped. I now know to be very gentle and to be diplomatic because the repercussions fall onto the children. So I'm very careful with how I bring in things, but I realize that honestly, there's a government way of doing things which you really can't, maybe as a collective, like we're talking about, maybe as a collective, something can be done. I'm hoping Charles will talk a bit to us. He stood up and spoke about putting our kids in schools. Charles' kids were born in New York, but recently I found them in my village. And they're going, his son is going to school in my village, in a local school. So I'm hoping Charles will also expound a bit on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Do we have other members? All right, one second here. I saw many hands. Please come to the front, Mr. Lachi. And once again, let's try to keep it 2 to 3 minutes.
Thanks. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel as though that the problem with the schooling is not necessarily with the schools, but is more of a deeper issue. And that issue is the fact that we gear up everybody in Uganda, at least like the students, with tools as a means not to better the country, but to escape. You know, you build the school. Thank you, yeah. No, but I'm serious though. We give the people the tools so that they can leave, so that they can become expats, so that they can go to schools in the States, in Europe, and everywhere else, and then 9 times out of 10, they stay. And the problem is not because the schools here, or the schools in Uganda are not good. They're good enough to make sure that we can get out. They're good enough to make sure that we have doctors and lawyers and everything like that. The problem, though, I feel like is roots back to the 40% unemployment, the fact that we have boda drivers with PhDs, you know, the fact that we don't have opportunity within the country, which is why this whole going back is an important thing to talk about, is an important thing to discuss. If we don't go back, or if we don't establish something with roots in where our roots abide, then people are just going to keep on trying to leave, is what I'm saying. Now, of course, there are the examples of village schools which don't have floors and don't have ceilings, but they have students, they have the potential, they have everything there. It's just that after learning something, you need to also have a place to apply it. And that's why I feel as if this type of thing should keep on being talked about. I mean, you know, I'm just a simple Muzungu, so I might not have the whole, I might not have everything settled, but that's what I feel, that it's not just education, because our parents went to schools there and they're not dumb. You're sending your kids there because you want them to learn something. Like, we need to not just think that the schooling there is the issue. I mean, it's part of a bigger problem, I feel like. And yeah, well, if anybody has any answers to that, then please enlighten us in the group. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the words of inspiration. But you're not a Muzungu. Muganda Muzungu. There's a correction right there. Please, Charlie.
Hello, I'm Imelda Alitua, and I'll just do a brief background. I was born in Uganda, but raised here in the States, and maybe you guys are familiar with some of my parents, but high school, they decided to send me back to Uganda for O-level. So I did S2, S3, and S4. They didn't put me in international school because they wanted me to learn Uganda itself and the people. So the issue, I'm going based off of the discussion. So for anyone who's like looking to send their kids back or going back with children, my parents learned this with me, which is why they didn't do it with my brothers afterwards. But I feel like the educational system in Uganda limits creativity for students. For example, the literature. You learn the teachings that you learn from the literature courses are all British education. They don't really focus on African literature books, except for a few books in Kenya. Africa is full of many authors that they don't dive deep into. Even the English courses is British educational system. They really focus on the science, Christian religion, if you take it, and a little bit of the arts and craft. But I felt like doing O-level in Uganda did prepare me for the college courses to be independent, learning value with people. But in terms of the educational system itself, coming back, I had to work twice as hard to do my SAT scores because you have to do national exams in Uganda, which is totally different from the educational system here in United States. I know in Uganda they do offer prep courses for SAT, but it's very difficult because you have to do the national exam, which is typically in November and December, and then SATs also are around that time. And you have to devote, it's a lot of money to do 2 types of tutoring. And my parents were very angry about this because I had 2 sets of tutors on top of going to a boarding school. One for SATs, one for the national exams, and just to catch up with the educational system in Uganda. It's 13 courses in Uganda for O-level compared to here in the States for high school where it's 7 or 6. So it was very draining for me, for an American student, to go back to Uganda, and it took a toll on my parents also, and they saw that. So I would think twice before you do this venture back to Uganda. You have to think about your kids also. How will they adapt? It was to the point where I would have to go back to the States twice, 2 months out of the year, because I just shut down. For the parents, you know that there is a caning system. That was a real shock to me, entering S2, to see people get caned. And you know, being taught in Uganda, you're supposed to respect your teachers because your parents aren't around when you're in boarding school. Literally, when I walked in the first day, they told you to say goodbye to your parents. They're your financial benefactor. We are your parents, so you have to obey us. In the US, you're taught differently, you know? So you have to prepare your kids also. I would cry on the phone telling my parents, why are they caning? Why can't I speak up? In the States, they encourage our creativity to speak up, voice yourself. Uganda, they don't do that. And I feel that's a very issue. My friends in Uganda that I left behind in O-level, they did their master's, some of them did their PhD, but they still don't have a job in Uganda through the educational system that they went through there. So just think twice.
So I think she brings up some legitimate concerns as to what happens if you decide to go back home. So we have to also look at the positive things, but sometimes there's some hesitancy that comes with it. But I'm going to turn it back now to Mr. Andrew Musoke, who actually went to school in Africa as well as going to school in the States. So I think he offers a very interesting perspective as well. So Mr. Andrew?
Thank you. and I'd like to thank the last speaker because I think she brought up something very interesting. The whole, respect the teacher and kind of don't speak up, because it plays a lot throughout your life. When you're trained to do that for a number of years, let's say 12 to 14 years growing up, when you get into boardrooms, when you get into business deals, when you get into negotiations, it makes it less likely for you to put your hand up or to say this is wrong. And it's really important for you to build that up. And the difference when I came to school in the States was really that, we want you to speak. We want to hear your voice. We want to hear your opinion. If the professor is wrong, correct them. Correct the professor. And that didn't happen when I was going to school back in Africa. I think it's really important to notice that, with the lack of education or with the lack of resources, as I think Rahman mentioned, when I started our company in 2012, we had to hire a number of people. There were 4 of us who started it, and now we have about 35 people. During the first 2 months of hiring people, we'd interview them, and they'd say a lot of great things, and they had really impressive resumes, masters in this, masters in that. And we had master's students who had never programmed, even though they're applying for an IT firm. We had master's students in computer science. They were masters in computer science, and they never programmed, or they'd never touched code, or didn't know how to read code. But they knew a lot of theory, and that was because a lot of the universities they went to didn't really have the resources to provide for all these students, to provide the software, to buy Microsoft Office, to buy, all these different things. So the way we overcame it, I think the positive side is that we have really smart people living in Uganda and Africa in general. And what we did instead was we changed our mentality and said, let's hire someone who we see potential with, and then let's train them. And let's do everything in our power to bring them up to speed. And once we did that, they were able to fly. So I think when you go in as a person trying to launch your own business or become an entrepreneur, you have to have faith in the system, you have to have faith in people, and you have to use everything you've learned to help build them. It'll take you maybe a month or 2 months longer, but the rewards would be great, and you'll be helping them. And some of the successes we see that I love, which was first a little bittersweet, was seeing one of my employees move on to a bigger company. And it was a big loss for us personally, but it was a big win for me in helping my country move forward and helping someone better their lives. And we love that. So when someone moves on to a bigger job and they gain the skills from our firm, we love that. That's a win for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And I just want to make sure that if any of our panelist speakers over here, Ms. Kurosaki or Mr. Wale, I believe you have something to say.
Thank you. I feel strongly about this because I was involved in a project specifically on Uganda about education. The program was called LEAP, which is Learn as You Earn. The project was 2 projects actually, one from the Norwegian and one from the USAID here. And I thought it was quite successful because we were able to explore various angles of needs, be it at-risk children and so on and so forth, or early dropout rates and so on and so forth like that. And we're able to address most of those quite well. But as Banji mentioned, I don't really think that that's the issue. Yes, of course, we can always improve the quality of education across the board. But don't forget, it is also in Uganda that we have students from Makerere University build, as a matter of fact, invented a bomb diffusing robot. That's commendable. It is also in Uganda from Makerere University that we have an electric car built, which is Kira. You guys know that. So, creativity is, we're not short of creativity all over the continent. What we short of, perhaps, I believe, is the market. I mean, just imagine having created something like that. This is something that is quite necessary on the ground. How come we're not able to develop market for it? Because that's really what drives the economy, and that's what drives the need for education. Universities are tools, and they're tools for developing a particular country. They're not just for building human resources that's going to be available to world needs, where really our countries cannot compete when it comes to salary distributions. Just imagine that, So I think this is some of the things that we are missing, and maybe something that we really need to focus on. So I think the cry here really is the diaspora saying, I am important, I'm worthy, fight for me. And we're telling all our countries that. Fight for me. I'm important. I'm worthy. Fight for me. What is in it for me? You know, and I think what the country should be, what perhaps we should be discussing is how to make that support attractive, how to make it attractive from the ground as to why we should invest in it and why we should support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wale. I'd like to invite Jordan Sikatwa to the front. Jordan's with View TV. He has offered online streaming. It is part of pro bono for his company, and we are very happy to have him here. He wants to share some insight from online viewers. We have over 1.9 thousand that are watching right now, and he wants to share some insight.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing tonight? Good. I do apologize. I should have dressed up better, but I came to work. All right. So I just wanna first of all I wanna introduce myself, what I do, and why I'm here. So professionally, I work as an account manager / support at a company in Cambridge, but I also run this company, BUE. It's a media and advertising company for Ugandans in the diaspora. So we do this all around like the Ugandan communities in from like Virginia, Florida, all over the place. So if you guys have any events, you can call us up. But what I really want to talk about before I get to these comments, as far as education goes, there's a lot of misunderstanding, I would say. The difference between the education and the skills. Like a gentleman here pointed out, I wasn't looking, it was probably you, sir. So part of my company, we employ about 8 Ugandans living in Uganda and doing work in Uganda. And what the problem is, a lot of these people do have education and they do have masters and PhDs and all that. Problem is they are not skilled. So they do have, you know, the documents to talk about them, but they don't have the skills. And as far as Uganda is right now, we need less PhDs and more of people that can put street lights on the street. So we need high school education, math and English, and a skill. A factory that puts up computers in China, a bunch of them don't have PhDs, but they have money coming into the country because they can set up a factory, put a computer, a projector like this together, and they have a job. We don't have that in Uganda. We have very well-educated people and no skills and nothing to do. So what we are trying to change is giving skills. Teach someone how to put a pen together. Get a company in America that wants pens put together. Now, 300 people from this village can put pens together. They can send their children to school. For the next 50 or 100 years in Uganda, we are not going to be in a position where we need that many doctors or that many lawyers. Who is going to pay you? People from outside of Uganda. So now you need firms to come from outside of Uganda so that business can run. It's the citizens that are supposed to pay for the service, but if they don't have the jobs, they will not pay for your service. That's my spiel. Now let's go on to a few things here that our viewers have mentioned. I just want to pick out a few of them. So someone here says, the diaspora mass is critical mass and it is good enough to demand change in official public policy. So what I've seen a lot of people mentioning, if you, men and women want to talk about their political stand, the education is more theoretical than practical. Books, not tear gas, will improve education. As far as your kids, you have to take them when they're really young. Someone says, I went to law school in Uganda and here in the US, oh boy, what a big difference it is. That's about it. So it's 3 minutes, right? All right, thanks.
All right, thank you, Jordan. We appreciate it. You dropped some knowledge on us on a serious note, and I appreciate that. And I agree with what Jordan said in regards to the fact that we have a lot of parents, and I think that it's a part of the culture back in the day, and where you know, your children are only going to be as successful if they get, you know, the highest standard level of education. If you're not a doctor, or if you're not a lawyer, if you're not someone who's an engineer, I mean, the top level kind of status jobs, then, you know, you're not necessarily doing your level best. And I think that it is an old school mentality, and that doesn't enable us as a country or as a continent to really grow at the levels, different levels. There's a different type of levels in where we can start to make impact in the country. But of course, everyone wants the best for their children. So, I mean, it's kind of, you know, there's a little bit of a challenge there. But we'll move on to the next topic because we have quite a bit to get through. The next discussion topic is health and personal concerns. Access to healthcare. Where is our healthcare system in Africa at a very large level? And where is our healthcare system within our countries of origin? Do we have access to available resources? How responsive are our healthcare agents? Does the government push out as much in terms of healthcare as it should? I mean, these are the questions we need to start to ask one another. And today we're going to talk about that. So healthcare is huge. We need it. I mean, that's the vital sign of our life. We want to keep it in scope. I know I can see some faces here. So let's make sure we keep it in scope. Let's not get too personal, but let's just talk on the base level of where are we in terms of Africa, in terms of healthcare. What can we do? But let's first identify what access do we have to healthcare and how can it be improved if need be. Any questions? Edmund Safali, come to the front. You're burning. 3 minutes.
Now, I come from Uganda. Most of my time, I live in Uganda. And I've been fortunate enough to also go to study and work in the United Kingdom, Dubai, and here. Now, in Uganda, everyone is told, I don't know how we are told, but I think it's because of our education system, that I have to care about myself at the expense of the other. So this is what happens in a health center, especially Mulago. I know right now they're still working on it. Everyone doesn't want to go to Mulago, but when you have lost it in any international hospital, they push you to. Mulago is the National Referral Hospital of Uganda. Even if you go to IHK, those are international hospitals, when your time is about to come, they will refer you back to Mulago. But none of us wants to go to Mulago because everyone thinks or believes that going to Mulago is for the poor, for the less disadvantaged. But guess what? We have one of the biggest killers today in Kampala called Boda Boda. If you go back home and you want to avoid jam, you would certainly jump onto a Boda Boda. But everybody who wants to make a quick money living will certainly get a Boda Boda to get some little money. So this comes up with a situation where there's so many accidents, and irrespective of the status quo you are, you might most likely find yourself in Mulago. And it is dangerous to go and find yourself in Mulago. First of all, when you get an accident on, with the Boda Boda, for instance, chances are the police will pick you not by an ambulance, by a truck. They will push you down. By the time you are in Mulago, you are most likely 3-4 times worse off. Now you get to Mulago, you won't find a consultant. You will most likely find a disgruntled nurse. A nurse who hasn't been paid for the last 3 months. A nurse who doesn't have equipment, material, and everything. Possibly even is in that profession, not because of the passion, but because of what to do. So this is the situation. in Kampala. If you go to A&E in Mulago on a Friday evening, around 11 p.m., you can run away. Let me tell you a secret. It's now going to be an open one. One time, the sister to the president was on her way to Mbarara in a Porsche vehicle, but it didn't have these personalized number plates or government number plates. And unfortunately, there was an accident. The driver died, the bodyguard survived, she survived. All the people came to rush to try and rescue these two people, including the sister to the president. No one who had a vehicle or even a police car had fuel. So they were like, we don't have fuel. I can't put him in my vehicle. This is somebody who is dying. Guess what? A truck full of sand only offered and said, but unless you can put them on sand on top to take her to the hospital. And they put her on the truck. That is how bad the health system is in Uganda.
Thank you very much, Edmund. Oh, true and real life story right there. He knows, yeah, he's the man. You're right. Mr. Kazinduka, please.
Thank you. The name is Joe Amoti Kazinduka. And let me also use this opportunity to commend the visionaries, that's what I want to call them, who have started this platform of for our young people and their friends, and for us perpetually young people also, to share some ideas. So the idea of connectivity, identity, is a critical idea in the course of human development. And you people who have organized this, consider yourself very fortunate that you have identity. You have a place you can associate with, as opposed to some of our friends who look like you that reside in this country that yearn for that opportunity. So take this very seriously, and I hope you can take it across this country, all the states, this platform, so that you give opportunity to other youngsters that are in other regions of this country. So that is the first point I want to make. Now, in terms of the topics or the discussion points here, we are on to our third discussion. And I think we have to pause here and be very careful, because what I'm hearing now are just a lot of depressing stories. And yet our topic is, our purpose here is to try and interest many of you in going back to work in Uganda. Now, the last 20 minutes, I don't think I would even think of going to work in Uganda, having listened to what I have just listened. So is the purpose, because we can spend the next 1 hour. I also have a lot of stories I can tell about the healthcare in Uganda. But what is our objective here? Is our objective to try and, yes, recognize there are some things that are not working well? And if they are we also discussing solutions? What can we do? What is our role? Because each one of us can come here and stand and tell a lot of depressing stories about the healthcare, about education. You don't even need to be in this meeting. So if your purpose is to encourage people here, to motivate people, to try and go back and contribute towards rebuilding Africa, then let's find solutions instead of just telling depressing stories, and some of them in very comic ways. And we enjoy a good laugh. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know where the moderators are, but to build on to Mr. Kazinduka's point is I'm a pharmacist. I actually work in Baltimore. And some of the stories you're hearing about Uganda, I see them in Baltimore. So sometimes healthcare can be a complicated subject, not to give a pass to the government and some of the things that are going on in Uganda, but some of these issues are more systemic, some they are resource-based. You can live in a country which has the best healthcare system, but you don't have access or you cannot afford it. So I think our challenge as a diaspora is to mobilize the healthcare providers we have here, to mobilize the professionals we have here, to actually transfer some of the resources, to transfer some of the materials. There are hospitals here who have a lot of excess inventory, which we can mobilize. Actually, you just have to get the shipping costs, and you transfer some of these resources back to your country. It could be Uganda, it could be anywhere in Africa. So that was one of the things I kept pushing through our organizations like UNA or other diaspora organizations. What we need to do is just work together, coordinate with each other, network with other professionals. We have many doctors, many nurses. Actually, many are already volunteering. There are groups of nurses who go to Ginger every year and make a big difference in our community. So if there are Ugandans or other Africans who want to make a difference, to make sure we have less of these stories, then it can be done if we mobilize our resources together as a diaspora. And I think that's the main issue. As a pharmacist, when I go back and see the pharmacist system in Uganda, I also am working on ways. I'm doing research right now to see how can we improve the pharmacy system in Uganda from the curriculum at the university level and also in the communities where you give people malaria medication, but you don't tell them how to use it. And you run into situations where you're providing medicine, but no instructions, no follow-up with patients, and you end up not getting the outcomes of care. So I think as a diaspora, that's the challenge we have as professionals, as people who come here and are successful, is how do we mobilize ourselves to network and actually go back and make a difference. And I think that's the point I wanted to make in building.
Thank you very much, Daniel. We have many hands in the room, so we'll take it one by one, please. All right, I do apologize. We'll go with Marjorie, because I know you're waiting, so that's fine.
So my point builds a bit on Daniel's, but just putting a little bit more like parameters around it in terms of thinking about like healthcare from the business model perspective, and also what plagues, and this is really not just applicable for Uganda, but a lot of countries in the developing context and across sub-Saharan Africa, is that when countries find themselves in the developing stage, more people are plagued with infectious diseases as opposed to chronic diseases. So from a business model perspective, you end up with a gap on the chronic disease side. So if you, have something like heart disease or unfortunately have some type of cancer or something like that, because there aren't a critical mass of people for the business providers to provide solutions in that area. And then you also end up with gaps in ambulatory care. So, and I think that in terms of my family's personal experiences in Uganda, that's definitely been the case, where somebody gets malaria or something like that, they're able to go to the pharmacy, they're able to get what they need and move forward, because that's where the business has focused, because that's the critical mass, where the critical mass of people are. But then, if somebody gets cancer, they need to fly to Kenya or India or another place to receive treatment. So as we think about the types of things that we can do to mobilize, I think it's looking for where those gaps in the market are and finding opportunities that can really be productive. For example, there are a lot of countries in the developing context where they don't have ambulances, but a whole industry has popped up in the private ambulance sphere, where they're able to charge middle-class customers who do have the money to pay for these services, and that subsidizes the care that they might give for low-income individuals who may not be able to pay for it, but they can still be part of the ambulance network. Businesses such as providing like dialysis machines and things like that. These are some private sector solutions that really just need like good operators as well as investment. And so I would encourage people, if you are interested in that type of entrepreneur activity, there are gaps in this market, and it's very systematic, and there are reasons why there aren't a lot of providers there. But if you think that you're willing to take the risk in terms of either focusing on the chronic cases or focusing on some of these ambulatory issues, I think that can provide a solution to some of the things that we've been discussing, and actually quite lucrative, as it has been in some middle-income countries where more of these solutions are in place.
Thank you, Marjorie. Gina?
Just to go off what Marjorie said, when I moved recently in Uganda, I realized that actually some of the gaps you identified are being filled. Specifically in Kampala, we have private ambulance services all over the city that are accessible to anyone who needs them. As you know, there's quite a number of international hospitals that have come up, as well as clinics. And then also, to revert back to the main theme of today, going back to Africa. Many of you heard my sister earlier introduce herself. She's part of your group. She actually, along with a bunch of other people that I know, have gone back to Uganda and actually shadowed doctors at Nakasero, at Mulago, visited, the cancer wards for pediatric patients and things like that. This is something we need to continue to encourage, because that's where the access to quality healthcare comes in. If we have more doctors who are trained abroad and are willing to go and provide services to people at a lower cost, more people will have access to quality healthcare. So these are things that I think as a diaspora we can mobilize and encourage people to go back. I know churches do it. I know NGOs do it. I don't see why we can't.
Well said. Thank you very much. Please, Madam, come to the front. Oh, you'd like to sit?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Grace Nakalema. I just graduated from a Bachelor of Science in Community Health Education, and I'm planning to do an MPH in a year later. So a few years ago, I did my internship at Rakai Health Science Program. It's based in Kalisizo at Rakai District. And my project was focusing on patients that are affected with HIV/AIDS. So I'm not going to tell you this person's story because I don't want to talk about it, but I have been noticing that apart from that area that I did my project in, most local hospitals I've noticed in the village and even some areas in Kampala, they are lacking, actually they're more at high risk of exposure of diseases, such as they don't have proper supplies for their health services to protect themselves as health clinicians, nurses. They don't even have gloves, nothing. And all they do, I hope they do, is they wash their hands, but I don't know how often when they're seeing each patient. So I'm planning to, maybe after I finish my MPH, I'm planning to do a project in making sure that all local hospitals and within Kampala and back in the villages, they have items to protect themselves as well. And I don't know why, I always wonder why, but I guess it's more of a political issue as well. But protecting yourself is a very essential thing for yourself and patients. That's all I want to say.
All right. So we have many people in the room here. I can't get to every single one, but Superstar, hold on a second. Madame, please come to the front.
Thank you, everyone. I'm grateful for the opportunity. I just wanted to comment on healthcare, but if you'll allow me also a few minutes on education, since I'm an educator. I spent two months in Mulago Hospital with a family member who was ill, and so I have very strong feelings about education and healthcare. First of all, that healthcare in Uganda is a complex country. And the 2 months that I spent in Mulago were really instructive, because you really have a lot of really good healthcare professionals. And it explains why so many healthcare professionals can be exported out of the country, imported into a country, and be very add value wherever they are. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm going to respond, if I may, I'm going to respond that with a personal story. I'll make it brief. I have a friend. The other thing that I want to say before I respond to your question is that I live in New York, and I can tell you that there are it's a tale of two cities. You can find healthcare in New York as it is in Uganda, where people really lack the basics. So much of what even happens in very developed countries, especially the US, has to do with the degree of resources you have. So I have an older friend of mine, senior citizen, very close friend of mine. She was sick for a long time, and being kind of somebody who tags along with seniors, I took her many times when she was sick to Columbia, which is the #1 hospital in the US. And every time she was there, they said her problem was psychiatric. So psychiatric it became. Every time she was there, go see her, hold her hand, She was like my grandmother. One day, a young person who was involved in her life said, but you live in Bronx, why don't you go to Lincoln Hospital and see if they can treat you because you seem to have an issue. She went to Lincoln Emergency Hospital, which is an inferior hospital by US standards. And in the emergency room that night was doctor from Uganda, right? After the other doctor from Uganda died, who was the head of surgery, I believe, at Lincoln Hospital. The one who took over, I believe, from him was another Ugandan doctor, who, by the way, were Makerere at the same time. He was in medicine and I was in commerce. But he's the one who diagnosed my senior citizen friend after many years of going to the #1 hospital with a hole in her intestine, and is the one who treated her. How did I find out? Because I went to see, I was like, who's your doctor? Lo and behold, I was like, but I know this person. And it was the guy who used to be in University Hall when I was in Africa Hall, who's now probably still on staff at Lincoln Hospital. So in response to your question, I mean, look, guys, we have people from Makerere who are heads of departments. They've been heads of department. I believe Manini Mulera was head of neonatology department at University of Toronto, and the heads of so many hospitals around the US have been headed by Ugandans. So I wanted to share with you that my experience in the 2 months that I was in Uganda was really illustrative to me of just the kind of quality medical professionals we do have in Uganda. I think we have failed them as people who could perhaps add some value, but needless to say, the Uganda government has also failed us. Am I okay to say that? I hope that we're, yeah. Yeah. And then I wanted to say as an educator that once again we have a tale of two cities, because I teach in the university system in New York. And I can tell you that there are many problems with education in the US. And if you go to a private school, like some of you mentioned that you did, you can get a really quality education, and if you're a public school student, you can get an inferior education. So we underrate so much ourselves, and that deprecating humor about Uganda. I went to Ugandan schools until Makerere, and I still find people who come from Uganda and other African countries who really have very, very good, considering all the shortfalls that we have in Africa. So I just wanted to share one last thing. I went to a Congo in Harlem festival last weekend, and you meet a lot of Europeans and other people who have been to school in Uganda. So the last filmmaker that I met at the Congo in Harlem series had been at Nkozi University as a student, and he had a film showing here in New York.
Bugalo, 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 Bugalo. Thank you so much. We certainly do appreciate that. I can certainly feel the energy, the passion, more importantly, what internally that you have felt through what people have shared with you, but more importantly, what you've experienced. And I certainly do take that, and we'll certainly have to make sure that as we look at how can we move past the areas of where we fall short in our education system, not just only in Uganda, but how can we start to develop some sort of methodology in terms of where we can start to implement areas of development for our people educationally. Those are the things I'm going to make sure that we start to consider. But that being said, I'm looking at the time. I want to make sure that we move on to action item number 3, or number 4, should I say. Pride, family, and culture concerns. This is an area here that also myself I'd add in a few words, but just because I'm second generation. But fears of family and the first mini topic there is family embarrassment. When you look at yourself in here in the diaspora, and you decide that you're going to move back home or into another country, mostly for those who are moving back to the country of their origin, what do people have to say about you? How much money have you made? What career have you developed? What are you contributing back to not just the country, but to the family? And it is a real, concern. I know because I've spoken to people about it. Everything here is because I've spoken to a couple of individuals and they've shared with me. So this is not something I cooked up just one day with my team, but we've actually done surveys. We've spoken to individuals over a couple of years, and that's why we have that. And I'm curious to see what people think about it. Is it an actual concern? Do people think about that if they were to migrate back to their country? Do people think that their family members or friends may put them in a position where they may have to contribute or share with them their resources, or they may have to defend themselves in a position where they may not necessarily have a certain level of wealth? Daniel Kawuma, as one of our panel speakers, said that we show a certain image which may not necessarily be factual. And that's the truth. It's the truth, I was in Uganda some time back. I showed a certain image. It wasn't necessarily the truth. No, but it's human nature. Come on, guys. It's human nature. And I think at times it harms us more than helps us. All of us want to show face. We can't always show face. So I want to talk about that. It's a barrier. It really is a barrier when it comes down to the full tuition. So I'll ask the audience here first before I go to the panel speakers. And I want to hear from somebody I haven't heard from yet. Anybody? I'm looking at one person in the back. Did you want to say something? Tender, you going to come front? No? All right. Apollo, you going to come to front? Yep. It's not really a question, but the topic is in regards to if you're to move back to your country of origin, what does it mean in terms of your culture and pride? How can you be home and not necessarily feel that you're going to have individuals ask you questions that have to do with whether it be your finances or not necessarily feeling a burden internally, feeling that you have to give something back to your, even, I guess, your, I don't want to say village, but I mean, the tribe or, whatever have you. What can you do to overcome that if, in fact, that's an issue?
I think that at some level it might be a bit of an issue because when you come and live in the States for a while or the UK or wherever it is outside Uganda, by the time you go back home, there's definitely a level of expectation in that they hope that you're going to come and do better than if you'd actually stayed back home in Uganda. But the very interesting thing, depending, I guess, upon where you went and who your peers were, if it's surprising to find out that many people actually stayed back home in Uganda who actually had some means are actually able to do pretty well. And for you coming back to Uganda from the States, depending upon what you did, I know for some people that I've talked to, they've just told me point blank, I can't get the same quality of life I have here in the States if I return home. For example, some people who I've talked to have become nurses, and in Uganda, it's not often to have men as nurses, and they're fairly well paid here in the States. It's not unusual to find them making almost 6 figures a year. And if they're going to go back home with that skill set, they're going to be challenged financially to maintain the same standard of living. And at the same time, they'll have that stigma. Some people might feel uncomfortable going back home and saying, I'm a nurse. So I feel that, yes, there is that culture thing. You really do sometimes have a feeling that you want to be able to go back home and actually shine, and not just be like someone never even left Uganda.
Does anyone else in the audience want to provide any more insight? Please, sir, come to the front.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Amanda. To our panel, all protocol served. My name is Edward Wanda. I'm a resident of New York, a member of this community. I may not speak directly to the subject matter, but allow me to, one, say a few things. Most important thing is to thank you people for having organized and taken the initiative to do what you did today. When I first learned about this, we applauded it. It brought back very good memories. Why do I say this? First of all, it was very important to have a panel of this kind. It brings us together, it speaks to the issues which are very pertinent to many of us, through it educates us. And what I also anticipated was that there would be new ideas which would present new opportunities for people. And actually, those have been generated. And I think at the end of the day, we shall have learned a lot about what is possible and where opportunities lie. In spite of the challenges, I know a colleague of mine, Kazenduka, was not very happy about the negative news maybe flowing. Say we are here to discuss the possibilities, the opportunities, and not to depress the environment. However, sometimes we can't help it. Sometimes the challenges are also there, they exist. We must be able to deal with them. And I also speak on behalf of the Uganda American Association of Greater New York. It's a community organization of Ugandans in New York. The chapter has been existing since 1990. 1990. At the height of our organization here, we were able to host a convention of Ugandans in 2006. Prior to that, events of this nature were informative. And that's why, to me, this only helps to rebuild this community to what we were as a community and what is possible within our community. When I look at the panel here, many are colleagues, friends. Ruth, I applaud you for that move to Uganda. And to be honest, I would encourage many of us, given our talents and many of the things we have learned and achieved here, to be able to learn that experience and be able to do much in Uganda. My personal experience is, yes, I've lived in the US for a long time, but I never left Uganda. Why? I always engaged Uganda. On average, I can say I go home every year, ever since I've been here, when it was possible for me to do. I have engaged Uganda by being involved in certain projects which are always ongoing at home. So you find yourself still being part of Uganda, and you appreciate the limitations within the environment, and you also find how you can navigate those challenges within Uganda. The truth of the matter is this: we're a great nation, a people highly educated, highly skilled. Maybe there's a challenge of some skill sets in terms of modern day technology. Yes, but those challenges, I believe, can be addressed. But the key thing here is that for us to identify within our limitations those challenges that we can still be able to deal with and the opportunities that are existing in our country. You spoke very well. Marjorie, I loved you. Spoke very well. Yes, there are certain gaps. We can deal with those gaps. We can identify them. The most important thing is that we have to understand our history. We came from a place where, and we went through a lot. There was an aspect where we had to deal with what I would say, the inadequacies which were created because of our political history, the violence, and the shortcomings which were built in. We had to overcome all that. The Amin era affected education in terms of quantity. The population was growing, but we had inadequacies in terms of schools building. So when Uganda settles the post-Obote time, going to the movement time, you're dealing with a larger population, but being served by very limited resources. We had to play what you call a catch-up game. Build the quantity at the expense of quality. But I think now we're in a phase where we can be able to improve on our quality in education, in health, and in all those things. But guys, all I can say, I don't want to speak much. I could speak the whole day. But I appreciate the fact that as a community, we are building again. The young people, all of you, my nieces here, very many. I thank you very much for the job done. And the parents of my generation, I think we've done a reasonable job to ensure, and we came here to support the youth. Andrew, I don't know what to say. I'm proud of you. Hey, Tim, proud of you. John, I'm happy. Mr. Kauma, like I said, I know I heard of you a lot. I wasn't there, but guess what? You're on the right path. All I can say on behalf of the Uganda American Association Committee, by the way, many of my colleagues say, if you don't mind, let them stand. We support it from the back. I would like them to stand up here. Grace Serada, Mildred Senoro, where's Margaret? She's not here. This is Margaret Musima Kazinduka. Sisika Kumba is there. And the Ugandan community in New York. Thank you very much. And to be honest, I would like to welcome these young men to take over from us. We're a little tired and old. And thank the panel.
And just one more thing. We're continuing with the program, but I think it's not closing, but I just wanted to let you know that this was a very big community effort. So we want to really thank the New York community because they've been working tirelessly in the back, making sure everybody has drinks, making sure everybody can get some food. So we want to tell you so much. Margaret Tumasimi, we appreciate you. Grace, we appreciate you. And we're very, very, very happy that you're able to help us with this event.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Mr. Edward. The whole entire New York Uganda community certainly hasn't gone without notice. We do acknowledge, we see it, we feel it, feeling it in our tummies, and we're gonna make sure that we carry this movement forward here and also in other communities. But I want to make sure that we've captured everybody's views and thoughts in regards to our topic, which has to do with pride, family, and culture. Put yourself in a position in where if you wanted to move into your country of origin or just in the country of Africa, how do you feel about that? What does it mean internally to you? This is more of an emotional kind of intact thing. This has nothing to do with an external factor. It's internal. So where are people's mindset when it comes to that? It doesn't have to be that you've actually experienced it, but if you were in that position. And because I'm not seeing any hands, I'm going to move to the panelist speakers here. We're going to cap it at 3, and I'm going to look to the ladies first. Tessie, please share with me.
I think in terms of just kind of the family cultural connection, I'll name a challenge that I've had, but then I'll name its corollary solution. I found, like I said during my introduction, I was born and raised in the United States, and I've never really, I'm very American. In addition to really connecting with my Ugandan culture, that's just a fact. I'm very much influenced by my upbringing in the DC area. So oftentimes when I would be in Uganda, more kind of in a familial or just talking to people who are from the areas where my parents came up with, they would point out that, well, you're American, so you don't understand what's actually going on here. And that was a very frustrating way of engaging. So I'll name the corollary solution, is that a lot of the things that I have been a part of, whether it's helping with some of these private investments or helping with some of the advocacy that I was involved with in college, I did by finding a broader community, whether it be Ugandans who don't know me from Uganda or friends of Uganda who are interested in helping, because then I could really just engage with my skill set and the knowledge that I brought to it, and I wasn't constantly challenged with, well, like, you're really not Ugandan enough. So that was kind of the way that I personally worked around it. Obviously, people have different experiences in terms of how much time they've spent in their respective countries, but that was just my personal experience.
All right, I'll repeat it. No, it wasn't really much of a question. It was more so sharing insight in terms of what you've observed and experienced within your respective, trade or field back home or here, and how does it relate to your family and culture of moving to your country of origin? Would there be any areas of concern in terms of expectations? So it's more of a personal thing. Like, are there expectations that could be there or that you already know are in existence? Because the whole entire point of this topic is to have everybody have an understanding of what are some of the things that families do expect of people when they move back, if you were to. Is there something where you've decided to leave and it wasn't in the best terms and there's issues if you're to move back? Or financially, financial ties as well, because sometimes land is involved and at times you're allotted something and it's taken away, or things of that nature. So we wanted to make sure that we explored the whole entire gamut of family, culture, and of course people, at least most of us Africans, we have a lot of pride. So if something was done wrong, you don't want to fess up. How does that work out? Do you still want to raise your hand? No? Okay. Oh, you said yes. Okay, all right. I'll come to you. You sure? Oh, okay. 2-3 minutes? Or? Oh, no microphone. Okay. No, she needs it? Oh, she doesn't?
No, I was...
No, live stream.
Okay, I don't think I will be successful to be, actually, if I decided to go back home, I think it will be maybe I wasn't thinking about what I was saying, but I don't think I have any plans to go back home. One thing, I was raised in this country. Actually, I was raised in New York since I was 4 years old. I came to this country in 1989 with my mom and my middle sister. Some of you know Sincere, some of you may not know her. But, I am not a reserved person. I grew up in this country teaching me how to speak my voice. I'm not a reserved person. And I've dealt with a lot of family gossips. They go behind my back, tell my parents this, Grace. And it's just hard for me to communicate is also another thing. I communicated with doctors during my project, and they looked at me like I was such an aggressive person, but it wasn't that I was aggressive. I was saying what I have seen, and I don't like it. It wasn't that I was being standoffish, and maybe this is not the type of language or type of I would say communication they have. So the problem is communication. Are you going to be comfortable with communication with colleagues back at home as comparing to communication here, communication in Canada, communication UK or wherever? That's something you also have to talk about if you have been raised here for at least 25 years of your life.
All right. So I do apologize. I know there's some hands coming up now. Thank you, Grace, for opening up that whirlwind. But we want to hear from some of the panelists, and we'll come back. That being said, I heard one of the ladies here. We had her. All right, Tessie, thank you. All right, appreciate it.
I want to commend my parents for the way they raised us. my brothers and I, because like I mentioned before, even we're first generation, and my parents kept us very grounded. They kept us in Uganda cultural groups. We danced and performed every other weekend. We were in Kinyarwanda groups as well. And so, when I moved back home, I think my family there kind of, I don't want to say expected me to fail, but they expected me to have so many frustrations that I would just run away. And so they would say, no, you can't manage this place. Guys are going to try and cheat you. You won't be able to drive. You can't manage these boda guys. And then when we went back in August, I had all these contact numbers in my phone. Oh, you need this? It's okay. I have you. It was like I became the, how do you say, like I was the connection between them. Now my parents are visiting. I'm like, okay, this used to be my home, so it was like I was now connecting them to their own land and their country, and so they're like, wow. I mean, I don't mean to like pat myself on the back, but they were like, they were all impressed and shocked that I was able to make that move and just kind of blend in, basically. And I'm not saying that it was easy. It was kind of difficult because, of course, there are culture shocks, and you deal with different things daily, like you mentioned, communication. The workplace, when I first started working in the office, I was working with a bunch of men, and I came from a boss who was very anal and precise and wanted things done at a particular time. And then I started working in this office where a meeting at 9 means 9:30. And someone's just strolling in, stirring their tea, like, please, Americano, don't fast forward us, So, so there were expectations on both sides, and but and they were frustrating, but at the same time, it was an eye-opening experience, and I would, I'm going back, so, yeah.
Well, I have a couple of things that I think could be viewed as negative or tough points that made it that came up when I moved home. One is because I'm a girl, I'm a woman, and I'm I'm up country, and people up country are not used to talking to a woman who actually I look younger than I actually am, so they always thought I was a child. And I'm here trying to deal at the same level with them. And the second point is that I'm not married. And back home, that's a very, very big deal. Very big deal. Much more, I don't trust me, because it was not an issue when I was here. But the moment I went home, and many people here warned me and said, in 1 year, you're going to get married. More from peer pressure than anything, but I'm still not married. Anyway, so those two things were really, really have been barriers for me, but barriers that I managed to overcome. One thing, you talked about your parents raising you the way they did. I've always been very there are certain things that we were taught that came naturally on respecting our elders. So you have to learn how to balance respect with not just giving in, but learning how to deal with it in a systematic way. I think as we women are smart, we have a certain psychology that we know naturally. We know how it's not manipulation, but it's a smart way of getting things done where the other people feel like it's their idea in the first place. So I'm big, and I'm sorry, but this is something that I've learned how to use, in what I'm doing. And then another thing that I'm taking advantage of is the fact that I lived here, and they used to call me Muzungu, and I'm dark-skinned, but I'm Muzungu in Kabale. And I don't take it as a negative. Well, now they know I'm down with them at the grassroots, but I take advantage of it in some ways, and I don't feel bad about it. Like there are times when I throw on an accent, with a certain group of people who will be impressed by the accent. You learn ways of getting through things. And then also people gave me, you learn from people, someone talked about being engaged in the community. It's even from here you can be engaged. Attend conventions. Don't look down on them and think they're just, these conventions are just for fun and all that. I went to UNA conventions. I hardly missed them. And honestly, it created a certain special connection with me and my people. I was the president of the international community of Banyakigezi for many years. And even that helped me a lot. And I honestly attribute it as one of the reasons that led me to moving back home, because I made connections that I otherwise wouldn't have made. It also gave me a certain self-confidence in me as Ruth. And yeah, there are many reasons behind it. I think ICOB is one of the reasons that I got this extra boost to go home. So I think I'll just stop at that.
So before we move on, I want to make sure that everybody gets to talk on this specific topic. Do we have any other questions or comments in regards to this very important action item? Anybody? Please. Please state your name again, and please.
Okay, no problem. Hi, so my name is Yasmin, and I'm from Ghana. And yes, Yasmin. And I've actually never fit in anywhere. In America, I was never American enough. And then in Ghana, I was never Ghanaian enough. So I've always just been stuck in, like both worlds. But for me, when I went to Ghana, I loved it. In the beginning, it was very hard to communicate. But once I realized like patience was key, I actually used a lot of their behaviors to my advantage. And it has been very, very successful for me. As I was saying before, I run my business out of Ghana, and that's how I pay my bills in New York. So don't use it as a setback. And I wasn't gonna say anything till you said what you said. I mean, it's still your personal choice. If you don't want to go back home, you never have to. But Bozoma St. John is one of my inspirations. She's a Ghanaian girl, and she's also the chief brand ambassador for Uber at the moment, which is a $68 million company. And she's just so inspiring. And she has something that she says all the time, which is never have any fear. She says, when I walk in a room, I'm never scared. I don't care that I'm the only black girl. I'm the tallest person in the room sometimes, and I'm also the only African. Just imagine her world. And she says she never has any fear. She goes in every situation knowing that the results she's gonna want is what she hopes for. And that's why she picks the jobs that she's had are just so like, she was also like chief brand ambassador at like Apple at one point and also at Beats at one point. But I learned from her and I learned from my mistakes. And for me, I've used that behavior as my advantage by just studying them and knowing what to do. And I'm always ahead.